I'm good, thanks.
All right, we have 6 o'clock, so I'm going to call this meeting of the Charter Township of Comstock Planning Commission to order. If everyone would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, first up, we are looking for an approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any amendments to make, any agenda items? Great, then looking for a motion on that.
I make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Treasurer Bloomfield, supported by Secretary Kreitzer to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Next up, the approval of the minutes from the April 23rd, 2026 meeting. Any adjustments to those? I didn't have any either. Be looking for a motion to approve that.
I make a motion to approve the minutes for April 23rd, 2026.
Support.
Motion made by Treasurer Bloomfield, supported by Commissioner Weintraub, to approve the minutes of the April 23rd, 2026 meeting. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No. Motion carries. Next up is citizen comment. A citizen may state their name and address and may speak only for one time for no more than 3 minutes. This time may not be given to another citizen to extend their time. The person speaking has the floor, and no other citizen shall speak during someone else's time. During this time, you will be making statements to the board without discussion from the board members, but you are welcome to make an appointment with planning and zoning staff to discuss your comments further. Please keep comments clean and respectful. You can just you can step right up to the podium there. Yeah, absolutely.
Am I limited to 3 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. My name is Tim Shank. I am developing property along Gull Road. And for the last 10 or 15 years, I've had fireworks that were approved at certain locations. One is at the corner of Miller and Sprinkle Road. That was been at least 15 years. And then the last couple, 3 years, I've had it located just beyond O'Reilly's in a vacant lot there. And it's come to my attention after talking with Casey Bryant, the application from Jake's Fireworks has been rejected. And I've tried to accommodate and be a good developer for the Comstock Township for a lot of years. In fact, this has been probably pretty close to 50 years. And when I started with a Pizza Hut on Gull Road, which is now called the Rooster Call. And so I'm desperate to find out why at such a late date I was notified that with the 4th of July and the 250th year of our celebration, that I'd been rejected for the fireworks sale at those 2 locations. So I humbly ask that you take and maybe reconsider that location. But for your own edification, I have purchased the property where Dr. Bruno is, and so I'll have some later plans which will have to go before you folks here at some point. They're just finishing up the Chick-fil-A. They're ready to take and open the Christian Brothers Auto Repair Shop, and they're hoping to get the blacktop and the asphalt down here in the next 30 days at the 7 Brew Coffee. So I've been doing this, like I say, for 40 or 50 years. And I use, it's not a lot of money that you create out of the rental of those sites, but I've been paying property taxes on all those sites for a long, long time, except the doctor's office. That's soon to be mine to pay. So if you would somehow or another work with me, maybe we could take and transfer, if there's a big objection with that vacant property.
Thank you. We hit 3 minutes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm back again. My name is Eugene Thurman, and my address is 5991 Wright Street. And I'm back before you again. I'm trying to get you guys to change the ordinance. I got a couple properties off of Market and Starworth, and also off of East Michigan and Shirley Street. And we usually do a lot of family gatherings and different things like that. I'm trying to get a shed or something out there, or barn or garage or et cetera. But I appreciate if you guys can consider changing the ordinance in that area for, we can do that. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Ike Thurman, live at 1103 Fairbanks, and I'm here for the same reason. We purchased the property like 6-7 years ago. Then we got ready to put up some sheds. They said we have to have a house on it. So we appreciate it if you can change the ordinance back. And so we have old cars. From one old car lover to another, we would like somewhere to store them, build a shed to store them in. For one, we have 65 big Deuce and a Quarter, 68 big Wildcat, and 69, and they all convertible, 69 Cadillac, and then 68 Firebird, 68 Dodge Charger, and 82 Monte Carlo. So we're just trying to protect them from the element. So I hope you could take this in consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Emily Murphy, 6355 Woodley Drive. I want to thank the Planning Commission for seeking out ways to understand all facets of the requested rezoning of 8546 East G Avenue at the last Planning Commission meeting, April 23rd, 2026. This was a rezone request that many citizens spoke out against. There are concerns that the requestee will use this rezoning in a way that will harm surrounding wetlands and Campbell Lake. As I had previously stated at the public hearing, rezoning properties to ag opens up a lot of risk to our township. Our community fought long and hard to ensure a new STEM building, Comstock Elementary, greenhouses, parents of the children who attend these schools, and surrounding residents do not end up with a battery energy storage system in their backyard. This opportunity was possible because the zoning of 7600 East Main was B2 Community Business District that was then rezoned to Ag Residential District. When this rezone was granted on 1/6/2025, almost immediately the property owner was looking to sell his farmland to a Denmark company, Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners. SIP states that they are the world's largest dedicated fund manager within Greenfield Energy Investments on their website. They are currently targeting 15 high-growth, middle-income markets with strong macroeconomics and power sector fundamentals. Is Comstock a market target? We were told by the landowner that he was only pursuing the rezoning because his family had farmed it for 70 years and he thought the property taxes were too high. He requested to rezone his farmland because he only had plans to continue to farm it, he stated. He failed to mention that the farming would be a battery energy storage system. Comstock officials have spent so much time and energy on learning how to protect our township from these renewable energy entities from barging into our area. Because of this, I hope that whoever desk this request lands on, the Planning Commission, the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Township Board, take the time necessary to really look at all of the concerns on this specific request and feel confident when they make the best decision they can for the environment and for the citizens. This is another time that the citizens are looking to our local township leaders. We need to put this community first. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. If there is no further citizen comment, we'll move on to new business. Okay. Go ahead.
I just wanted to kind of address some of the information that's been going around regarding my property and how I manage and take care of it. And I just want to give a brief history. I raised in Comstock. I went to school in Comstock, graduated, raised my family in Comstock. I spent the majority of my life in Comstock Township. I acquired the property that we're talking about on G Avenue from the Myers Trust. It was first offered to the Land Conservancy, and they purchased a small portion of it. I was then offered the balance at the appraised value. I purchased it from the estate. It's 42 acres. The issue raised about tree clearing, and I have obtained 2 permits from Comstock Township to clear trees. From the very beginning, when Comstock first issued the tree clearing requirement, I applied for a permit and received one. The second time I cleared trees, I applied for a permit and received one. I've done all the clearing under being permitted by Comstock Township. The burning I do on there, I burn some of the trees that we have cleared, and I get permits from the Township Fire Department every time. I have a stack of them. And I only burn when the weather conditions are correct and when they only issue it. As far as soil erosion and sediment, I have 3 permits from the Kalamazoo County Soil Erosion Office. My first one was back in 2021. I've had continuous permits in place over the entire time I worked on the property. They come out, the soil inspection officer comes out every month, inspects, gives me a report. I have had no violations of soil erosion leaving my site, of any contamination. Sometimes they'll suggest that I might have to do this or that. I take care of it. I'm on good terms and relation with them. My drive permit, I've applied and I have permits for my driveway, my attachment to the road, and the guardrail change. I also have a permit from the health department for my well I put in. I've done everything on my property under the guidance of the bodies that have issued the permits. The property photos that were taken on my property, one of my neighbors chose to trespass on my property and walk my property and take photos. They then used those photos and circulated them through the community and came down to the ordinance enforcement officer here and filed a complaint. In filing the complaint, the officer questioned where the photos were taken from. They instruct them that they were taken from their home, and they were not. The ordinance officer went out to their home, met with them. At that time, the person admitted that he did not take them from his home, that what he was seeing was not visible, and the ordinance officer did not observe any visible contamination or blight or whatever he was complaining about from the home. He went on my property, trespassed, walked my property, and took photos and passed them, trying to affect the outcome. As far as the photos showed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Karen Fisher, Mike's wife. He didn't get to, he had, let's see. So the ordinance officer found that this gentleman had lied and said that the photos couldn't be used because he got them from trespassing. Let's see, people were complaining about scrap metal. There's a utility trailer that was full of recycling, and there was a refrigerator on it from the house that was not working. It was not on the lake shore. It was over 1,500 feet from the lake shore, and it was not leaking any fluids. The burn piles, there's some sawmill scraps, some plywood from the site. There was a Christmas tree, and Mike did get a permit to burn that stuff. The shed that's out there came with the property. There were some oil buckets that were out there, and those were left, the road construction crew, when they fixed the road there, Mike allowed them to park their equipment on his property so they wouldn't have to drive it back and forth from their warehouse. And they left some buckets there. Mike has since gotten rid of those. The timbers are laying there to be dried because Mike's cutting his own timbers to build his barn. There were some trailers out there. We allowed our kids to park their trailers there over the winter. They weren't visible from the road. You could only see them if you were on the property. Those are gone now too, except I think there's one trailer left and a car trailer and a utility trailer there, which again, cannot be seen from anywhere except on our property. The logs are neatly stacked. The ordinance officer said that everything that was on the property that you could see from the neighbor's property was A-okay. It's all within the ordinance and nothing, no infractions were filed against Mike because everything is as it should be. And Mike also wanted to invite, if any of you would like to walk the property on the board, he would be happy to meet you there so you can get a firsthand look yourself. Anything else? Thanks.
Thank you.
Lori Bowersox, 4822 Landing Way. I would like to address the rezoning request for parcel number 03205-021-8546 East G Avenue. In that request, the second sentence begins, "The AGR district is consistent with the Comstock Township land use plan." That sentence is rather misleading. Yes, AGR is in the master plan, but it is not in the plan for that parcel. The rest of that sentence, "and acre parcels' natural features if the parcel is ever developed," gives an opinion by the owner about the parcel, an opinion not supported in the master plan. As stated by a citizen at the previous meeting, intent does not move from owner to owner. Preserving and protecting does not transfer from owner to owner. Mr. Fisher's rationale for changing from R1A to AGR is not supported. Mr. Fisher mentions much larger minimum lot size. It is already permitted zoning district R1A, 2A 4.17, 3P 3.24. Mr. Fisher mentions pasture, food plots, evergreen plots. It is already permitted zoning district R1A 2G. Mr. Fisher mentions restore woodlot. It is already permitted zoning district R1A landscaping 5.4A8. Mr. Fisher mentions horses. It is already permitted R1A 3R 4.4 4.12. This is a win-win. Mr. Fisher gets everything he's asked for by staying with R1A, and the master plan has no change. Considerable work went into the master plan. We join you in supporting the plan and denying Mr. Fisher's rezoning request. Thank you for your time this evening, and thank you for serving Comstock Township. You are appreciated.
Thank you.
Hi. Sorry. I do not agree with the zoning. If you want horses, you can have horses for your grandkids.
Please direct your comments to the board.
Don't feel that the rezoning is being an honest rezoning. I feel that it's, because just like it was previously stated, everything's already there that they want to do with it. We don't want another battery plant. We don't want another data center. And it doesn't need to be rezoned for everything that he currently wants to do. It's already like that. And for the board to rezone it and not listen to what the community really feels and wants is wrong. And I don't know. I have been a resident for my whole life also, and I don't want to sell. I want to stay in Comstock. I don't feel like I should have to sell because people are giving up our property to overwhelm us, take our water, and depreciate my property. And I don't feel that it's correct, and I don't feel that it's being honestly represented, their intentions. I'm sorry, but that's how I feel, and thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, John Dickman, Township President. I actually live in that area. All Mike is looking to do is build a retirement house where he can sit on his back porch and he can watch his horses romp around in his pasture. It was brought up that the master plan says that that is reserved for green space. Well, I also grow hay. And I have pasture land. And the last time I looked, my hay and my pasture was pretty stinking green. Now, that being said, there was a comment made that he could put a chicken farm there if he wanted. Well, yeah, he could, if he jumped through 10,000 hoops with the State Department of Ag and got a sign off from the township. There are certain things that don't need to be seen as bad or awful just because it's different than what it already is. There's nothing wrong with having 42 acres of pasture. There's nothing wrong with having a barn that's got 2, 3, however many horses in it. We'll get into that later. I don't see any reason to not do his rezone. Yeah, he could do it in R1. The only thing he wouldn't be able to do would be to build a barn big enough to put 400 bales of hay in. He would need a variance for that. And now that's more money for the township. But if he's looking to do nothing more than serve his family and have a relaxing atmosphere out there, a pastoral setting, that's fine with me. I don't have an issue with it at all. That being said, I also don't think it is proper for, the neighbors are acting like an HOA over his property, okay? That's not property attached to those subdivisions that are right there. Mike already stated that the previous owner offered that property to the Land Conservancy. The Land Conservancy didn't want the whole thing. So it was offered to Mike and he bought it. What's the problem with that? There shouldn't be an issue here. And with that, I guess I'm done. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. If there's no further citizen comment, we'll move on to new business, which is the mobile vendor ordinance public hearing.
I'll take it away for you, Madam Chair. So we adopted this ordinance last summer, August 18th to be exact. And since then, we've had a resident attempt to come in for a food truck permit, and we ran into a few issues earlier this year. So to clear up a few things for the residents and to make my job a little bit easier, we have added just a few changes. Under, what number is this? Number 2, letter C, we now offer seasonal permits up to 180 calendar days in annual permits. Formerly, we only allowed short-term permits for up to 7 calendar days. So if they wanted it for the year, it'd be 52 permits to be pulled. I wasn't sure if you guys wanted yearly or annual permits. We discussed yearly last meeting, but wasn't sure what you all felt would be best there. And then Treasurer Bloomfield recommended a correction here from removed from the premises to be stored and secured instead. Those are the only 2 changes made from last meeting.
All right, so this is a public hearing, so if anyone wants to open up public hearing, we can hear from the citizens and then we can discuss.
Make a motion to open public hearing for the mobile vendor ordinance.
Support.
Motion made by Treasurer Bloomfield, supported by Secretary Kreitzer to open the public hearing for the mobile vendor ordinance. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. The public hearing is now open for the mobile vendor ordinance, so we'll be hearing any commentary related to, specifically to the mobile vendor ordinance.
Madam Chair, I move we close the public hearing for the mobile vendor ordinance changes.
Support. Motion made by Commissioner Weintraub, supported by Treasurer Bloomfield, to close the public hearing on the mobile vendor ordinance. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? No? Motion carries. All right. Any discussion from the board on the changes? Casey, I have a question for you.
Yes.
The word yearly, or yearly permits, so if somebody came in and applied in June of 2026, and they said, hey, I want the yearly permit, by the word yearly, does that just imply that it would only go to 2027, and it would then be, like, to December 31st, but it would be maybe a prorated cost? Or would annual change it to where it's just a 12-month?
Okay.
And, like, I'm asking.
Yeah. No, I was, yes, so I thought yearly would also mean the 12 months, but if you guys prefer annual to be cleaner, that's fine, or even 365 days. Just spell it out that way.
I think annual might be the better word.
Perfect.
I agree.
That's the only comment I have.
We have to recommend this as a change to the board, is that correct?
Yes.
Yep. We would need a motion to recommend it.
I would so move that we recommend this to the Township Board for its approval.
Support.
Motion made by Commissioner Weintraub, supported by Secretary Kreitzer, to recommend approval of the amendments to the mobile vendor ordinance. Let's do a roll call vote, Casey.
All right. Commissioner Nowak?
Yes.
Commissioner Weintraub?
Yes.
Chair Lawrence?
Yes.
Secretary Kreitzer?
Yes.
Treasurer Bloomfield?
Yes.
Motion passes 5 yeas, 0 nays.
All righty. Moving on to the bylaw update.
Yes, so,
Got that, Casey?
yep, the only change here was made from Attorney Thal, and that is regarding the social media conduct of the commissioners, and that it could be considered malfeasance. So, any comments on that one?
I think we're all aligned with this. I do have a question of if we have enough people to vote on, because as a bylaw change, are we required a specific quantity of a vote?
It says 4 members, but I'm not sure if that'd be.
We don't need like 2/3 of the total voting body?
You typically do not.
Okay.
Because on section 5 at the very end, it says affirmative vote of 4 members of the planning commission.
Okay.
So I think as long as 4 of you guys say yes, that'd be adequate.
Okay. I just want to make sure before we went and voted and then there was an issue. So we'd be looking for a motion to adopt that if we so choose.
I make a motion to adopt the new bylaw update.
Support.
Motion made by Secretary Kreitzer, supported by Commissioner Weintraub, to adopt the new bylaw update, letter D under section 3.
All right.
All in favor? Let me just do a roll call.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Thanks.
Yep. Commissioner Weintraub?
Yes.
Chair Lawrence?
Yes.
Secretary Kreitzer?
Yes.
Treasurer Bloomfield?
Yes.
Commissioner Nowak?
Yes.
Motion passes 5 yeas, 0 nays.
All right, perfect. Moving right along. Up next, we have University of Michigan solar and wind presentation. Welcome to the podium.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Madeline Kroll. I'm with the University of Michigan Center for Empowering Communities. It's a mouthful, as Casey is pulling up my slides. I have quite a lot in stock for you today, and I just want to acknowledge that I've been to this very township around 2.5 years ago for the very first time to present to some of you on battery energy storage. Some of my colleagues, Sarah Mills and our partner at the Michigan State Energy Office within Eagle, Ian O'Leary, were here around a year ago to talk about our evolved understanding of renewable energy siting and PA 233. I'm saying this because if I have something on the agenda today that sounds duplicative or that is already familiar to you guys, please feel free to interrupt me and move me along so that we spend the time together on the things that you'd like to talk about and dive into deeper. I'm gonna just hold on a second. No, you're good, don't worry. Maybe in the meantime, I have pulled together today some introductory information about large-scale solar and wind energy systems. Then I have a refresher for, if that's desired, on PA 233 and what kind of the resulting zoning options may be for the township, as well as some sort of interactive element to it. But I'm jumping ahead of myself. Oh, I have the clicker. Let's see if this works. It does not. Okay, so for the next, I could talk about this for hours, but I'm gonna try to shrink it together. But for the next half hour, I hope to kind of go through all of the things that I just mentioned. A little bit about me. I've been working with the University of Michigan for the past 4 years. I'm a planner by training. I've worked in local government for a couple of years before I joined the university. And here I'm part researcher and research the impacts of large-scale renewables on communities in Michigan. And the other half of my job really is providing technical assistance on anything planning and zoning for utility scale solar, wind, battery energy storage. And as of recently, our team has also dipped their toes into data centers because that's the new hot thing that everyone has questions about. My guest today is paid for by the State Energy Office within Eagle, the Michigan Department for Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. That is really, for the past 7 years, has enabled our team to do this kind of training. So my perspective really is in providing information, answering some questions about kind of the state of energy development in the state, citing legislation and how that impacts your decisions, and really talk about the pros and cons of renewables in a balanced way. I'm not here with any other agenda than education. Okay, I already mentioned that. Brief overview over wind and solar energy development in Michigan, then talking a little bit about the siting legislation, PA 233, and the resulting permitting pathways, one of which being workable zoning ordinances, and talk a little bit about what makes an ordinance workable and how might that look like in the solar and in the wind space, but specifically on solar. And so I brought a little interactive activity that we can go through. And I want to also acknowledge, if you have questions throughout, I defer to you how you'd like to handle questions. You are welcome to interrupt me, or if you want to save it all to the end, that's okay too. Either way is fine with me. Okay, moving right along. Why are we talking about energy? I have brought to you a map of all of the renewable energy power plants or utility scale renewable energy projects in the state that are operational currently. So you see gray and yellow dots on those maps. The gray dots are wind energy projects, and the yellow dots are solar projects. So with utility scale, I really mean power plant size, wind farms, solar farms, rather than residential solar or wind. or wind turbines on like farm properties or something like that. I acknowledge not everyone is talking about megawatts all day like I am, but just for scale, I want to point out the majority of our renewable energy power in Michigan is really coming from wind at the moment. Of like 3 gigawatts of wind are currently contributing to our power mix. 2,000 megawatts come from solar, and then battery energy storage is we're really at the very beginning of battery development in the state. And it's a relatively small number of 115 megawatts of battery energy storage operational in Michigan at the moment. The one big project that's operational is in Coldwater Township. Whereas, I'm jumping to the next map which has a lot more dots, all of these dots are reflecting projects for renewable energy projects that developers are considering. And so you see the different colors here. Yellow are solar projects. I think green are, I need a new prescription for my glasses, but green are wind, and let me double check that I'm not telling you something wrong. And gray are battery energy storage projects. So there's a lot in the pipeline that developers are looking to develop.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
About the solar. When it has the megawatts for solar, is that the total megawatts that can be generated with solar? So it's not, I mean, how many days in Michigan do we have
That's a great
that
question.
generate solar?
That is a very fair question. So there is a key distinction to be made between megawatts or megawatt hours, or kilowatts and kilowatt hours, what we know from our energy bill. So megawatts is at a maximum capacity, how much that power plant can produce, how big the wires are, so to speak. Whereas megawatt hours is what is actually being produced. And so commonly, and often folks are wondering, wouldn't megawatt hours be a more specific value to show how much is that power plant really contributing to our but then things like different organizations and institutions like the Energy Information Association, which is a federal office, or also laws like PA 233 really talk in megawatts, which is why for an apples to apples comparison.
So is there metrics somewhere that we can look up that shows which each one of these yellow dots is generating in megawatts per month, per day, per year?
That is a great question. So specifically for these individual projects, I do not know whether there's publicly available data. There is an element, I think, of your question is how efficient are these systems, is what I'm reading between the lines. And so there are capacity factors, are basically a percentage of the sun is not shining 24/7, and it's not shining at full perfect angle at all times either. So different kinds of power generation technologies have different capacity factors. Meaning 30 or 40%, even natural gas plants do not have a capacity factor of 100 because they don't necessarily run at full capacity at all times. So those fluctuate between the technologies. I will look into whether that data that you were mentioning exists. I'm not aware of it at the moment. But
I would be curious too, if you could see it by kind of location, because potentially there's parts of the state that are better for it and other parts that are less productive, right? And so I think that would be valuable information too.
Yes, so there are, I have a map, or I have maps, or did I take them out? There are maps that show kind of the wind resource potential and solar resource potential across the state of Michigan. For solar, it's really kind of all the same. There aren't too stark differences. You might be surprised, but between the UP and here, or in the Lower Peninsula, weather obviously is a factor for solar specifically. Since we're on this, but for solar, for example, solar is actually very efficient in snowy conditions because solar panels nowadays are bifacial, so any light reflecting off of snow. So folks often are surprised by snow weather is actually good for solar production. But yes, the solar potential in Michigan is pretty much the same across. For wind, there are windier areas and less windy areas, and I have a map showing that later. But great questions. Okay, so what I really want to point out here is just if we looked at, or if we remember from the previous map, the majority of our renewable energy generated at the moment, it comes from wind. But what developers are really studying is, or hoping to develop more of, is solar as well as battery energy storage. Hybrid is that fourth row. Of 1,000 roundabout megawatts. Hybrid really refers to batteries plus some sort of power generation. It might be wind, it might be solar, it might be natural gas, anything that generates power to then be stored in the batteries. And so I want to be clear that not all of these dots will end up as a project. This is a foreshadowing 3 to 5 years where developers are needing to study how much would it cost to connect a project into the grid. And so this is the first place where they would show up on a map, and then conversations with landowners are happening, and with zoning or land use permit and all of the other permits that developers ought to go through. But it's kind of a look into the future where is kind of interest. And some of these projects fall through either because the cost of interconnecting that project to the power grid is too expensive at that point, or someone else has beaten a developer to it. So there's a couple of reasons why these projects might actually fall off of the map. But just for scale, I think it's helpful to understand solar and batteries is really where a lot of the attention is at the moment. So why is there so much activity? Part of it is increasing demand from consumers and cities and corporations and having sustainability goals. But importantly, I want to point your attention to that middle bullet, which is really that efficiency improvement, specifically in the wind space. Turbines have become taller, now allowing wind turbines to be economically viable in more areas than just the thumb, and maybe in like Gratiot, Isabella counties, where we've seen our initial wind development in Michigan. But now, because turbines get taller, more areas in Michigan are viable for wind. Similarly, cost reductions in solar have come down very, very starkly in the last 15 years. And so that now both the efficiency improvements in wind and the cost reductions in solar really make those two power generation sources among the most cheapest of power sources that we can have. And so our two big utilities, Consumers Energy and DTE, have actually been planning to build out more renewables for the last several years. They, in their integrated resource plans, IRPs, every couple of years need to show this is how we're planning to keep the lights on, and this is how we're going to do it the most affordable way. And renewables have always been a growing part of that equation of mixing natural gas and the energy assets that we have in Michigan, but relying on renewables for cheap power. Other factors that speak into this is an increased desire to be fuel independent, and geopolitics kind of steering away from natural gas or coal or these resource-heavy power generation, whereas wind and solar, being renewables, are really kind of creating an independency from importing materials. The last point makes only sense if you know that in the fall of 2023, the Michigan legislature passed a new renewable energy standard and calling for, and I have the numbers on the next slide, but even before the legislature asked for or upped our renewable energy targets, the utilities were actually already calling for that level of deployment of renewables as well, albeit with kind of a longer runway. And so that state policy really just increased the speed at which these resources are supposed to be built out. Speaking of which, so I'm jumping ahead of myself. So in the fall of 2023, the legislature passed a quite comprehensive bill on energy with loads of different things in it. Importantly, I want to just highlight Public Act 235 increased our mandated goal of building out renewable energy in the state to reach 50% renewable energy by 2030. For reference, the last solid number I have was from 2021, where we were at around 15%. We're a little over that now, because a lot of development has happened in the past couple of years. But you see, altogether, it is quite a stark increase in wanting to be 50% renewable in the next 4 years. There is a clean energy target of 100% clean by 2040. Clean is really incorporating both renewables as well as natural gas with carbon capture also is considered clean. You may be familiar already with the energy storage mandate. So Michigan was actually the first Midwestern state with a mandate to build out energy storage, which is also basically going from practically 0 to 2,500 megawatts in a very short timeline. There was some other legislation in there, and I'm going to talk a little bit more later about PA 233 and PA 234, which really were changing siting authority for these large projects. But more on that in a second. I first want to talk a little bit about super basic wind energy and what I think is helpful to understand in that context. And so as a planner, I think of wind energy in generally two different scales. We have residential, or like a farm has a wind turbine in the front yard, that kind of level of wind turbine, and then large commercial utility scale wind turbines. This is a map showing every location of existing wind turbines in the state of Michigan at this moment. This is I have the link of where I have that map from. It's the Michigan Public Service Commission is providing that information on wind turbine locations across the state. And here you really see the majority of it is in the thumb, and then Gratiot and Isabella County have quite a lot of wind development as well. There is a little bit in Hillsdale at the in the very south of the Lower Peninsula, but those are kind of the hot spots where wind development has happened historically. I mean, there's a little bit in the UP, but okay. So you might ask, where is utility scale wind possible? And I've already mentioned the turbines have become taller, the blades have become longer. With that, the turbines can catch more wind, and therefore even not ideal wind locations, which are already developed in the thumb and in the heart of Michigan, really now more areas are becoming viable. So this is a terribly, very far zoomed out map. If I zoomed into Kalamazoo County, you would see that it's kind of like a medium blue. So the darker the blue, the more wind resource potential is there. Again, I provided the link if anyone would like to pull this up online as well, they can do so. And I'm happy to help you guide through it. Anyways, so wind resource potential has really become better across the state, especially in kind of the lower half of the Lower Peninsula. A developer that wants to develop a wind project primarily looks for access to transmission grid, so those big regional power lines. Into that mix of which regions are suitable or maybe not goes a consideration of endangered species, so they're trying to stay clear of the birds and the bats as much as possible, as well as staying away from urban areas, one, because there's not enough open, developable land, and the more buildings you have, the higher the wind disruption is, which is why Metro Detroit, for example, is the least resource potential on the map, or Chicago, for example. Okay, so I've already mentioned a couple times, how tall are wind turbines nowadays? This is an older figure, and I have to admit I'm in the process of updating that. That is showing kind of from the very first wind projects in Michigan near the Mackinac Bridge on the very left, and kind of turbines have become taller, and you also see the blades have kind of become lankier and longer over time. And you cannot possibly read the little numbers, I just know them off the top of my head. So the tallest wind turbines in Michigan right now are 655 feet tall. In the thumb is a project, I believe it is from 2021, but don't quote me exactly on the year. In Isabella County, there is a wind project from No, that one's 2023, I apologize. In Isabella County, it's 2021. Those turbines are around 580 feet tall. The very, very old initial turbines were in the 400s. So you can see from 400 to 650, there's already been an increase in just the last several years. I want to spend a little bit more time on this particular slide because I think this is where folks have the most questions. What are the local impacts of utility scale wind? And I always acknowledge both the pros and the cons because there's pros and cons for everything. So on the local benefit side, I'm going to start on the left, is really predominantly renewable energy is an economic development tool. Importantly, landowner payments or landowners that are leasing a couple of acres, an acre or two for the turbine and maybe the access road are really receiving those lease payments, and research that we have done at our center is really showing how that is usually going back into farm reinvestment. So a farm landowner is not going to sell all of their land to the wind developer up and leaves, but rather reinvests that, and also helps with planning for farm succession because you have that stable wind turbine income for the next 30 years. What is very common in wind projects is that the developer of a wind farm would really share revenue with landowners even if they don't have turbines on their property. So not just farmers is really referring to neighbors, or good neighbor payments are common in the wind space. And so besides payments to individuals, tax payments are the number one thing. So wind turbines are taxed as utility personal property. Shameless plug, but we recently wrote a guide explaining kind of the different revenue streams coming from renewables, including kind of what the depreciation tables look like. So the majority of tax payment for wind projects is in year one, and then it drops quite quickly on the depreciation table. Developer donations I list there because it's not uncommon that the big companies that are developing these projects are also providing a scholarship to the high school or what have you, some sort of community benefits. Agreements are not unheard of in this space. So that's what the caveat is referring to. It really differs from developer to developer and what the communities are asking for, or are interested in, let me put it that way. The Renewables Ready Communities Award is a state grant program that is available to communities that are permitting projects like this locally. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about it later. And the host community agreement is kind of the counterpart of that if a project goes through the Michigan Public Service Commission for permitting. Again, I'll talk more about that later. But there are these are all of the different kinds of revenue streams that are associated with wind development. There's the last bullet on the benefit slide is jobs. And I have a caveat on this because I really want to distinguish between jobs during construction versus long-term local jobs. And so during construction, there's a lot of excavation jobs that can be done by local folk, but the installation of the wind turbines is a rather specialized undertaking. And in the long run, during operations, there's 10 turbines generate approximately one long-term job. So for a lot of the wind projects we have in Michigan, that's between 8 and 15 wind energy technicians that are permanently living in the community and are servicing and maintaining these wind turbines. When I talk about solar in a moment, there's a bit of a difference there. So there are some long-term jobs created in the communities.
I have a quick question for you. You talked about the landowner payments for 30 years, which is fairly standard, I think. What happens at the end of those 30 years?
That's a great question. So in the renewable energy space, and I want to argue that we should have this be more common in other land use conversations as well, is this concept of decommissioning. So for wind, solar, for batteries, it's common industry practice that a developer is willing to enter into a decommissioning agreement with the township, set aside funding mechanisms so that there is a bond, for example, available to the township too, in case the developer goes up belly up or disappears, that there is a funding mechanism available as a security for the township, but decommissioning agreement and requesting the developer to decommission that project at the end of its useful life, or if it's no longer generating power for a period of time, or the developer is not maintaining it, or whatever your trigger mechanisms might be to trigger decommissioning, that is very common and also a common component of a zoning ordinance for wind, for example, is to request that.
Is 30 years kind of the expectation of its usable life? Is that why that's kind of the number?
I think from solar, I know, and I believe that makes sense for wind too, is a lot of the financing that developers go through is based on 30 years. Leases are very commonly for 25 to 35 or anything in between years, so that is a common metric. In Michigan, we're now starting to see wind projects actually getting repowered, and they have not yet reached their 30-year lifespan, but they're getting repowered earlier. And so repowering is another element that I think is advisable to consider in a zoning ordinance as to what constitutes repowering and what would you request from a developer if they plan on repowering basically a whole new special land use permit or a site plan review. But 30 years is typically, I don't know that the wind turbines suddenly stop functioning in 30 years, but I guess you have to base your financial calculations as a developer or also any kind of agreements on some sort of time frame, and that's what I've seen so far. Okay, so on the local concerns side, the first bullet that I have here is noise and health. So I think one of the key things that come up that folks raise as concerns are the swooshing noise of wind turbines and the health impacts that those might have. Yes, wind turbines make noise. They have actually become quite quieter over time. There's some design in how you have like serrated edges on the blades that make turbines quieter. So newer turbines are significantly quieter than old turbines. But there has been some research done on kind of the health impact of that noise. And there's research from Canada that suggests that it's actually less the noise having a health impact, but more so the annoyance with the wind turbine having health impacts. Noise is something that is very commonly addressed through zoning ordinances and requiring the adherence to certain sound standards that developers can't exceed to kind of curb or address this concern. The next bullet here about concern is on wildlife. So I've already mentioned birds and bats or any kind of aviation impact is usually considered already in when developers decide or do the engineering for where do the wind turbines go to mitigate wildlife impacts. I know that the DTE has also done a significant amount of research on, like, once a project is operational, how many dead birds actually lay on the ground around the turbines to really get at this and protect this. There's also some technological improvements that can sense wildlife or swarms of birds coming nearby. But at the end of the day, collisions are not absolutely preventable. Collisions of bird and turbine. I think the biggest outright concern that I often hear about, and I get questions about wind, is the visual impact. It is very difficult to hide a wind turbine from far away, and I think the topography matters a little bit about how quickly you see and how far away you see turbines, but with them having grown in size also grows the visual impact. There is a lot of research happening, still ongoing, on whether or not wind turbines impact property values negatively. Initial research suggests that, I think you can find research that shows you whatever you want to find. On average, if you do a meta-analysis of the research that's out there, it's anywhere between no impact versus there might be a little dip of property values in the immediate vicinity, but after a year or two, those property values bounce back because the folks that have been upset about the project sell their house under value, but whoever moves in next, those property values usually stabilize again. It's also just really tricky to study property value impacts and totally detach that from just public acceptance of a project. The last bullet is on not why I moved here. And folks this is really about character and what is this community about, and does this fit here? And so my colleague Sarah Mills has done loads of research in the thumb, specifically on kind of public acceptance. And what she finds is really public acceptance is largely driven by how people perceive or why people live somewhere. So if people in very agricultural areas where folks live off of their land, attitudes towards wind are generally more positive than areas where folks live as a retirement home or to enjoy the views, which makes a whole lot of sense. But there's actually data backing that. Okay, are there any questions, introductory questions about wind before I move on to solar? I'll keep chugging along. Okay, what I think you need to know about solar energy. Okay, so as a planner, solar is particularly interesting because it is really scalable across all landscapes. You have rooftop solar, you have a little farmstead solar, or a solar with a commercial business, and then you have these really large solar farms. So this is a more complicated looking collage of pictures than I think it needs to be. It really is not that intimidating. It really just shows kind of across the urban-rural spectrum, solar really can fit anywhere. And then going down is really getting larger. Let me see what the next slide is. So how big are these utility scale solar projects? And I pulled a couple of pictures. So the very first one in the top right corner is the Lapeer Solar Project near Lansing, which at that time it was constructed, it was either 2018 or 19. It was the largest solar farm east of the Mississippi. It was very quickly doubled in size by the middle picture is showing the currently largest operational solar project in Shiawassee County, the Assembly Solar Project, which is 239 megawatts on around 1,200 acres of solar. I think it's 1,900 acres fenced. And then in the bottom right corner, I have an aerial picture and a zoomed out site plan from a project that's currently under construction next door in Calhoun County in Lee Township. We're going to soon be having the largest by far solar project in Michigan, which is around 1 gigawatt. So why that doesn't show up in my little table there on the left. So on the table, I show kind of average, among the proposed projects, the map with the many dots that I showed you earlier, the average size of a project like in that queue is 160 megawatts. So it's somewhere size-wise in between the first top two pictures. Translated that to acres, I usually do around, back of the napkin calculation, you can think about a megawatt is around 10 acres. Smaller projects sometimes are a megawatt per 5 acre, but the larger they get, the more they need to like puzzle around water bodies or property lines or those kinds of things. So a megawatt per 10 acres is usually an easy calculation. In the queue, so in the pipeline, the largest project in there is around 500 megawatts, but that's a little bit misleading because in the Lee Township example, that project is called Sunfish Solar 1 and 2. It actually feeds into 2 points at the transmission grid. Therefore, it counts as 2 projects in kind of the big energy data. So the 500 megawatts is lowballing it. But that's just for scale. So projects are becoming larger.
I have a question, Madeline. Yeah. How many megawatts make up a gigawatt?
1,000.
Okay, thank you.
1,000 megawatts. Good question. Thank you.
So then how big would that Sunfish Solar project be?
It's around 1,000 megawatts, so 1 gigawatt.
No, I mean like acreage-wise.
Oh, acreage-wise, I think it's 9,000 acres.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So it's currently under construction, so once that's up and running, I'm going to just swap out my pictures to make sure I show folks where the biggest one is. So where are solar developers looking to build these projects? Very similar to wind. Developers, first and foremost, are looking for where the power lines are. So again, this is publicly available data on the right that shows all of the transmission grid infrastructure and substations in Michigan, which is usually where developers look. For those big solar farms that we're talking about, they usually want to be within a couple of miles of power lines to then connect into the grid. Developers don't necessarily need contiguous acres. They don't need to find 9,000 acres in one piece. So they can a parcel here, a parcel there, and then there's typically underground wiring. But at the end of the day, it's still quite a significant amount of land that they're looking for. And that is why there's such a tension around farmland, because that is cleared, often flat land, cheaper than urban land. And so this is where this conversation around why does solar go onto farmland comes from. There is the opportunity to put solar on brownfields, absolutely, and I think that would be wonderful. Some of the limitations to put it on brownfields is really, one, a question of size. We don't really have a great sense even for where are all of our brownfields and how large are they, and would that even suffice to build a solar project on that space-wise, but also remediation concerns. It's just easier to not develop on brownfields. So that is the current trend, is really farmland. Question?
This is probably a stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I feel like it's a common one I hear. So why not use more tops of buildings, parking structures, things like that?
That's a great question. That's a really great question. In the 2023 energy legislation, there was a piece on distributed solar, which is referring to rooftop solar, that there used to be a cap of 1% of, now I need to get it straight, 1% of there is a limit on how much rooftop solar the utilities have to approve of. That cap was raised now to 10%. So now more rooftop solar is possible. So one of the parts of the answer is utility policy, is not necessarily making it easy. The other component is the cost, the per megawatt cost. And I actually have at the very, very end, I think it will take a while until I skip there, but I will make sure to show it to you at the end, or I might have deleted it. Anyways, the per megawatt hour price of rooftop solar compared to utility scale greenfield solar is quite significant. One of the reasons is developers who build large solar farms can buy in bulk, and can buy solar panels in bulk, but what's actually more contributing to the higher cost of rooftop solar is to get all these local permits, to get all of these construction workers on the roofs, here a little or here a couple of kilowatt, here a couple of kilowatt. And so adding that together is really requiring a lot of kind of soft cost to even build 100 megawatts of rooftop solar. And so it's just easier and easier and more cheaper to build on greenfields. Okay, to talk about the local impacts of utility scale solar, some of this looks a little bit familiar compared to wind. So we have landowner payments, and those are usually higher than for wind projects because the developer acknowledges if you put a solar farm in place, the landowner can't necessarily farm underneath it. There is some research being done on pairing agriculture and solar, agrivoltaics, but that's really more so in the research stage and not what we're seeing being deployed at the large scale. And so because of how the landowner cannot really do much else with that property at that time, solar developers, bless you, are willing to pay higher amounts per acre for a solar project. The next, so in the wind space, in almost all cases, developers are leasing land for wind. In the solar space, it's kind of 50-50. That's something that we've been trying to study. It is not uncommon that landowners are selling their land. And so we have ongoing research trying to actually understand who are these folks? Are these absentee landowners? What is the impact on tenant farmers? And so on and so forth. But I digress. Tax payments is another key local benefit for the township's perspective. Industrial personal property tax, utility personal property tax, real property tax, all of these things, again, are coming towards the township, the county, and the school district, and all the other taxing units. For solar, there is an option for the township to choose between regular taxation, ad valorem taxation, or to enter into a payment in lieu of taxes agreement, a PILT agreement. That is a fixed dollar amount. There are some pros and cons on over the 30 years, for example. Not every township would necessarily benefit under ad valorem more than PILT or the other way around. We have developed some calculator tools that you can find on our website that are location specific. You can punch in Comstock Township and school district and all of those things, tweak around with how big a solar project might be, and it actually spits out how much tax revenue is distributed to which taxing unit in year 1, in year 10, and all of the ones in between, to really be able to compare, would a build be more profitable for the township or not. On the jobs end, there's a whole lot of construction jobs during the construction period of solar projects, and those are typically done by, or able to be done by local electricians. It's like to install a solar panel is not necessarily requiring high-tech or very specific job knowledge, so that is something that can be done locally. But then in the long term, once a project is operational, there's really just a handful of long-term positions being produced in the host community, mostly referring to maintenance, mowing the lawns, making sure the fence is everything is functioning right. But there's less moving parts in a solar project, and therefore there are less maintenance jobs in the long term for these kinds of systems. Depending on what you planned underneath the solar panels, there might be a benefit for water quality and pollinator habitat. It's common practice to not put turf grass there, but rather a seed mix that has a benefit of creating pollinator habitat, and that is pretty much industry standard, that you can request more than turf grass in your zoning ordinance. On the local concern side, there is wildlife question mark. So typically, again, during construction activities, any animals, critters would be scared away. But the way fencing around solar projects works, so all large solar projects have to have a fence around them based on the National Electrical Code. And usually developers are utilizing wildlife fences so smaller animals can come back in, and depending on what was going on before on that property, it's maybe even quieter and more of a refuge than during active farming activities. But what is currently still being researched is the impact on white-tailed deer and how that changes migration patterns. What happens when the deers hop into the fence but can't come out again? So that is an ongoing, where the DNR has developed some best management practices and how tall do fences actually need to be to deter deer from hopping in. Short answer is 8 feet, while still meeting those National Electrical Code fence requirements. So that is an ongoing thing. Or how do movement patterns of deer change? Does that increase road collisions elsewhere? This is something that we're still trying to figure out. Solar farms are not invisible. There are visual impacts. And if you think about 9,000 acres in Lee Township of solar, that's several minutes of driving through solar. So it is a change to the landscape, period. And again, you have the concern around how is this changing the character of our place. Similar to when there's active research happening on the impact of property values of solar, and there's a similar story of property values potentially being negatively impacted, but then bouncing back. But again, there's so much still ongoing. We have not had these large projects around for that long to really study the long-term impacts of this. And the last bullet is really a question of, is solar a wise use of our land? Which I could talk about for hours, but I'm gonna spare you today. Oops. The key question is...
Do you have some bullet points, like some overviews? I'm just curious your opinions.
I commonly ask folks around the concern about we are losing farmland. And this might be a hot take, but I think in the greater scheme of things, I often hear numbers of, we have this many acres in Michigan, if we only have 2 or 3% of that on solar, not a big deal. But I would argue, which might be true, and I think where there are concentrated impacts, if you think of 9,000 acres of solar in one place, that has impact, that might have impact on the local ag economy, or how many tractors the store next door is selling in a year. And so, or how landowners are spending their money, or if they're retiring and going to Florida and spending it there. And so it depends. And I think it really depends on what people care about. Is it the rural vista really, or is it farmer livelihoods that folks care about? Because if it's farmer livelihoods, then both wind and solar are brilliant to provide steady income. But I think a lot of people have very different feelings about what does farmland preservation actually mean to them. and that influences whether or not solar is a threat or contributing to succession planning and keeping land and farming, or at least the acres around it that are also owned by solar leasing farmers. So that was my nutshell version to that question. Okay, I know you are familiar with PA 233 to a degree. Maybe, yes. So for those who don't, in the fall of 2023, on the day I was here 2.5 years ago, the legislature, or the governor actually signed this law. And since then, our understanding of this law has really evolved. And there's still some things that I don't know the answer to and that no one really does. So it now creates an option, instead of a developer getting a local land use permit, if the project application stalls here, the developer can instead get a permit through the Michigan Public Service Commission, which is a governor-appointed 3-person commission. There's a bunch of staff working for them and reviewing these applications for completion and for all of the requirements that the law spells out, which is now basically a backstop for a developer to go around the township unless the township has in place an ordinance that's considered compatible with the law. I call that a CREO, a compatible renewable energy ordinance. This workaround is really only an option for large solar, wind, and storage projects with these certain size thresholds that I'm indicating there. So for solar, it's a 50 megawatt solar project, so let's think around 500 acres. Anything below that is subject to good old zoning. And any kind of zoning ordinance updates should probably also think about all sorts of scales of solar and not just these big ones. But it's really those large projects that are now subject to this. I guess I was here on November 2024. Okay, anyways, there's 2 small footnotes at the bottom here that I want to just point out to the folks who can't read them. One, a developer doesn't have to go to the state, it's an option. And even if the local ordinance isn't CREO, the developer can still, and there are reasons that they will want to, still work with you locally. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, for why that might be. Second, there is no eminent domain, so the state is not coming in and putting a solar farm somewhere where a landowner doesn't want it. So in all of these projects, there is a voluntary landowner that either sells or leases their property. So in a nutshell, and this is really the very short version of this, is I see these 4 pathways coming out of this law. Maybe this is a good time to say, I'm not your attorney. You have a brilliant attorney sitting here. So anything that I say, take it with a grain of salt. But what I think this law really creates is, one, it creates this concept of a compatible renewable energy ordinance, something that has not existed prior, which is a local zoning ordinance constrained by the law, specifically section 2268. That section spells out a setback can't be more restrictive than X. The sound standard can be more restrictive than Y, and really has those standards spelled out in 2268. That results really in projects being relatively easy to build from a developer's perspective, because it's all kind of standardized. And they're also pretty fast to develop because the law comes with certain timelines, and it's a really short, I think the township, if they receive a full application, have 3 months to review and decide on an application, so it's really quick. Then PA 233 creates this MPSC pathway, which has those same requirements as a CREO, but then the commission is actually adding additional minimum conditions. I will speak a little bit more in a second on what those entail. And then the law also requires the Michigan Public Service Commission to consider certain criteria, one interesting one being the impact on farmland and local land use. The percentage, second bullet is the percentage of land dedicated to energy generation, and the third one is escaping me. What that kind of results in are projects that are rather permissive in their standards, because they're those same 2268 standards, but there is a rather strong due diligence with it that the commission is upholding, and they're also in charge of all of the enforcement of the holding the decommissioning bond and those kinds of things. The right 2 buckets, the workable ordinance and unworkable ordinance, are really your good old zoning ordinance, but they're not meeting those CREO requirements. And what the difference is between yellow and red is entirely up to the developer, whether they find that ordinance developable, workable, or not. So in either case, those would be local zoning ordinances that are stricter than a CREO. A workable zoning ordinance is very context dependent on a specific project application, on a specific developer, so it's really tricky to get at those proactively. But I brought some materials that might inform what that might look like, though. And then an unworkable ordinance is a zoning ordinance that a developer deems unworkable, and in that case, it is likely that the developer might take that project application to the Michigan Public Service Commission. Because unless you have a CREO, they can do that. Oops, sorry. I have no sense for time also, so I am just going to keep chugging along. What is in a CREO are really those section 2268 standards. I spell out here 2268 contains for solar specific setbacks. I didn't copy the numbers, but I have copies of the law with me too. Setback, sound, height, fencing, and lighting. And for wind energy, it's setback, sound, height, shadow flicker restrictions, radar interference restrictions, and lighting. And I just want to be clear, we have maintained for the last couple of years a zoning database of all of Michigan's 1,856 local units of government. No project operational in Michigan right now was built under an ordinance as lax as a CREO. We barely really have a CREO in the state. As I said, time limits for CREO come with the law of 120 days, so it's pretty fast-paced. And there are some penalties where the developer can still go to the MPSC, even if you had a CREO, if either you don't act in time and decide, or you deny an application that meets CREO standards, or make your ordinance more restrictive after a developer announced their project. In that case, you get penalized by losing access to intervenor funds. So usually if a developer takes you to the state, you have access to up to $75,000 per zoning jurisdiction to kind of pay for your attorney to represent you in front of the MPSC. If you have a false CREO, or if you, those last bullets, you lose access to those dollars. So that's quite a penalty. What's in an MPSC project are those same standards, but then there are additional things in there that are really getting at compliance. There are a bunch more studies that the Michigan Public Service Commission requires. I want to just highlight one example is screening. So in one of the conditions of the MPSC, they can require vegetative screening of solar projects. It cannot be in a CREO, but the MPSC is using that as a condition if the local government verbalizes that that is something that they prioritize. What else? So there's a bunch of like sound studies post-construction to make sure the sound standards are met. Those kinds of compliance items are coming with an MPSC project. Additionally, I already mentioned the 21 minimum conditions. Importantly, I think, are screening for solar, annual safety trainings, particularly on battery energy storage systems, but also just emergency response planning in general. The MPSC is requiring of developers to study feasible alternatives, to study the impact on local land use and prime farmland, and on the percentage of land dedicated to energy generation, which kind of gets a little bit at some sort of fair share. We don't know how the commission will decide on this, on a Lee Township that maybe gets another project, if they've already done enough, TBD. If the developer goes through the MPSC, they have to make two kinds of payments to the community. One is a host community agreement. The developer has to pay $2,000 per megawatt one time to the township or to the zoning authority, and also provide those intervenor funds. The MPSC process is relatively long. From receiving a complete application to the commission deciding is a year. So they have a whole year to review and decide over that project, which is relatively long. So again, what is a workable, so what I skipped today was a long discussion of the pros and the cons of each of these pathways. They all come with pros and cons. In my work with townships, there are a lot of communities working towards a workable zoning ordinance. I want to again just remind you that an ordinance that a workable zoning ordinance is really an ordinance that doesn't meet the definition of a CREO, but works for the developer, so it's really developer dependent on what's workable or what's not. Because that is so ambiguous, I've pulled together zoning ordinances of all operational solar and wind projects in Michigan. I'm currently in the process of pulling together all of the operational battery storage projects, but there aren't that many to point to really get a sense for what was in the ordinance for those existing projects, what was workable in the past. And that data is publicly available. We're currently updating it, but what I'm observing there, all of these ordinances have some sort of CREO flavor in it, but none of the ordinances is as lax as the CREO. There are more standards to it. And so I'm pointing communities to this data to really see how much it varies, what can be workable. And I also say that with somewhat of a disclaimer or a warning, is that picking the most restrictive thing that you find in that table might also not be workable. Or if something was workable in place A, it might not be workable in place B because properties are differently sized or who knows what. So, but it gives some sort of sense for what's worked before. I mentioned earlier the Renewables Ready Communities Award, and that's an important piece of the workability question because, as you remember, in the commission, in the state permitting process, there is this host community benefits payment the developer has to make. And so when the law was passed, there was no local counterpart. There was no incentive or payment guaranteed to the township if they permit locally. And so the State Energy Office within Eagle created this Renewables Ready Communities Award grant program to just provide a counterpart for locally approved projects. It is paid by Eagle, not by the developer, which is an incentive for why developers actually want to make it work locally, because then they don't have to pay that. Another reason that developers appreciate the RRCA is because local governments receive more dollars. In a case where the township has zoning authority, the township would get $5,000 per megawatt one-time payment rather than the $2K through the state. So the developer saves money and the township gets more when locally permitted. And in either case, the Renewable Ready Communities Award and the Host Community Agreement too are very flexible for how you can use those dollars. There's really not many strings attached. Okay, a year and a half in, well, a year and a half since the state pathway has been an option to developers. I looked again this morning. Currently, there are 9 applications for solar and wind projects laying on the desk of the MPSC. They have not decided on any of these, and so we don't really know how some of these evaluation criteria are going to be decided on. What I am observing is that the state is setting a pretty high bar. They're really using these conditions and have been filing, especially for those initial applications that came to them, been deeming them incomplete and having quite a substantial amount of paperwork saying, or incompleteness memos of all of the things developers need to do better. So that was relieving to observe that it is not as much a rubber stamp as I worried, but it is a pretty high bar and a rigorous review. Meanwhile, at least 6 gigawatts of solar and wind storage have been permitted locally. It's a bit of an apples to oranges comparison because the time frames here are different, but I know that because these 40 projects, it's almost 50 local governments have received the Renewables Ready Communities Award for permitting 5 gigawatts of solar and 1 gigawatt of storage in the last 2 years, 3 years. Okay. Workability. It's really difficult developing a workable zoning ordinance is really context dependent, like we've already discussed, and what really even is workability. And so I have a lot of communities asking me, here, look at my ordinance, is this workable? Or I want to write an ordinance, what is workable? In either case, I think there are some strategies that we can think of when trying to get an understanding of workability. So one of the things is really take what's in the CREO, what's that standard in the law, and if you tweak it a little bit, it shouldn't be that much of a deal breaker, is my hypothesis. So here I, as an example, show you what in the CREO, in the MPSC, in the Workable Ordinance, solar sound standards have been. And so the CREO is a non-participating sound standard at the outer wall of 55 decibels LEQ 1 hour. So that means over the course of an hour, I measure the noise and it averages out to no more than 55 decibels at the dwelling on the non-participating property. MPSC has that same standard, but they have additionally hiring acoustics experts for post-construction monitoring to make sure this is really in compliance. In the Workable column, this is what I got from all of that ordinance data that I looked at and put into that big table. So really, communities have put in their zoning ordinances a wide range of sound standards, anything from ambient noise +5 to 60 decibel L max, and anything in between. If you see a sound standard at the property line of something below 45 dBA L max, that's probably unworkable, and I'm going to tell you why. So with sound standards and zoning ordinances, it can get into the really nitty-gritty, but some of the key concepts really are a good sound standard is made up of one, a reading type, so L max versus LEQ 1 hour, measure noise very differently. So the LEQ averages the sound over a period of time. It can be 1 hour or other time frames. In the law, it's 1 hour. Versus L max is you stand next to the solar farm with your phone, for example, and at no point in time does that project exceed 55. And so it's a lot more strict than an averaged sound requirement. Secondly, where you measure really matters. So commonly in zoning ordinances, I wonder what might be in your sound ordinance. You probably measure at the property line. Maybe not, but a lot of ordinances I see do that, versus measuring at the inhabited structure is actually further away from the property. And so where do you measure really impacts what might actually be the appropriate number, which is the third bullet here, the decibel amount. Of the other two, the decibel amount, the actual number, is it 45, is it 50, is it 55 decibels? That matters the least. It's the least consequential decision point as you're thinking about a sound standard. And so as you're taking, I'm going to jump one back, as you're thinking about tweaking, go backwards. So if you're tweaking a CREO item and maybe make it more consistent with your general zoning ordinance and measure at the property line rather than the outer dwelling, that might influence where you're like tweaking the number or tweaking the measuring location to still stay within the sense of workability. Another example, and this is really hard to read, are setbacks. So I pulled out here the setbacks. And again, the tweak points really are, where do you measure the setback from? Is it the property line? Is it the structure, the road, and all of the things in between? And what is the actual number of feet? And so again, here I've pulled data from past Workable projects. Again, it's a really broad range. Decommissioning, I skipped that because it's such a complex decommissioning agreements. There's so much in there and so much you could tweak. So I'm not going to dive into the detail, but we can talk more about decommissioning if you'd like. A second strategy is a lot of communities ask me, well, if the MPSC is requiring it, can I require it too? Sure. For the most part, that should probably be workable and not make the developer put their hands in the air and say no, because at a minimum, they would have to do it with the MPSC anyways. And so I would argue that an example for this is really screening. Screening cannot be in a CREO, in my non-lawyer opinion of what the CREO, but it is a condition of approval in the Michigan Public Service Commission process. And I do see in every Workable zoning ordinances that I've looked at, there is some discretion over screening here, screening where there's maybe residents nearby. I'm not talking about a mini forest around the whole solar farm, but in points, it is very much reasonable to include that as a requirement in a Workable ordinance. Similarly, my understanding of a CREO is that it's a by right plus site plan review kinds of process in all zoning districts, versus everyone does it through a special land use permit, which makes a whole lot of sense because that's when you can add discretionary standards. Which I would say copies the process of the MPSC that also has these conditions and evaluation criteria that are just enabling a little bit more context-dependent decision-making. Next, the third strategy is paying attention to deal breaker items. And the number one deal breaker item for a developer really is limiting where the project can go. So in a CREO, that is really an all districts are open for development kind of situation. Versus in workable zoning ordinances, it really is typically implemented in the ag district at large, or sometimes you have overlays that limit where solar can go and where solar cannot go. What it really comes down to is there sufficient land available in the overlay or in whichever district you identify in your zoning ordinance that enables development. And so I sometimes see overlays that are barely 500 acres large. And if you remember, in 500 acres, it's really hard to develop a 50 megawatt solar project in the first place. And so sizing that is really tricky. You'd have to assume not all landowners might sign up. And importantly, you have to have access to the transmission lines to even make this make sense. And so what gets really difficult here in the bottom right corner is a lot of communities that are responding to a proposal. In those cases, the developer often already has a location in mind. And if you then go ahead and say, well, in my ordinance, I'm going to make that not happen, that is likely a deal breaker for the developer that might initiate them going to the MPSC. And so being really proactive is actually the opportunity to really study where in our township is the infrastructure, where is the space, what are areas in our township that we are hoping to preserve for residential development or tourism development or who knows what, and really tying it to your master plan about what development you plan on seeing, and identifying the areas in your township that might make more sense for development, for solar development or wind development than others. But it's difficult. And strategy 4 is getting yourself easier wiggle room, which is a casual way of saying there are some things, let me skip that actually. There are some, I apologize for skipping. So there are some things the MPSC is requiring that local governments typically don't require. And if you don't make the developer jump through those hoops, maybe in turn you can ask for something more that you actually prioritize. And so timeline is not a great example. But, and this is not a great example either, I apologize. One of the requirements that the MPSC has is requesting alternative locations analysis. They require pretty extensive proof of things that developers consult with DNR and with EGLE and with all of these other state agencies very early on. And I'd argue there might be some townships in Michigan that don't necessarily need to see proof of that early consultation. The developer needs to get the permit either way. But if you don't make the developer go through the paperwork of proving to you that they consulted with EGLE months ago, maybe you can increase the setback. Maybe you can ask for more screening. And so this is really where, unfortunately, zoning becomes somewhat of a negotiation with what are you willing to give up and what are you really prioritizing. And maybe you can give some of these things up, and if you really familiarize yourself with what's in the MPSC process and what are they all requiring, what of those things can you live without to then in turn really leverage what you are prioritizing. I have no idea how we're doing in time, but I did bring a bit of a little zoning activity that we can go through if you are interested in doing that, and unless I see a shaking head. If we have like another 20 minutes tops, I would do that. Okay, let me just get my activity sets. So I brought instructions, if you don't mind handing these out to everyone. And I will show them on the slide so you guys see them too. And then everyone gets one of these. And I will explain what this all is all about. You can also share it, but you're welcome to keep them. Okay. I'm doing this with the example of solar, but some of this might be transferable. It's more of a getting the general idea of it rather than actual numbers. So this is a solar hypothetical, that's what the yellow box says, but the idea will be really useful for any technology. So what you have in front of you are 10 sets of cards. One stack of cards is dedicated to sound. One of them is to setbacks. So all of the things that we kind of just talked about, which are the 10 or some of the 10 key components of a zoning ordinance for solar. And on green cards, you have those CREO standards that I showed earlier. On blue, the MPSC, the same color coding that I've used throughout the slides. And so I really, if you want to entertain me to, in 3 steps, build your dream ordinance, and then we're talking a little bit about prioritization, and in the 3rd step, I'm going to throw a curveball at you, and we'll see what happens. So in step 1, take a minute to kind of flip through the cards, and if you were the sole king of Comstock Township or queen, what would your dream ordinance look like? Which setback would you choose? Which sound standard would you choose? And you can ignore the colors, or don't worry about workability at this point, but what are some of the zoning standards that you prefer to see? Flipping through one by one, each card set. Red. And thinking about what are some of the things that you would like to see and that you prioritize as you're thinking about zoning for solar. So let's imagine this is a solar ordinance. This is where I turn on jazz music and let you look for a moment. Does anyone have questions? That's okay. We're colorblind here. It's all good. Do we need another minute or two? Casey, you already look done. You're done? Okay. please give me a sign when you're ready to move on. I don't want to rush you, but I also want to be respectful of your time. Okay, suddenly everyone's done. Wonderful. Would one of you like to share out, was that difficult? So was that tricky? Were there things that you were in between of two cards?
I think there were a few that were in between.
In between?
Yeah.
Because the differences between cards was so minimal, or?
I think minimal, yeah,
Okay, thank you.
for myself.
Just personal, yeah, dream ordinance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, can I take a peek at your guys' colors? I see all of the colors for the folks sitting behind me. All of the colors are represented, and it's colorful, and I think that speaks to how that is a complex. Building a dream ordinance is not an easy undertaking. Wonderful. You passed step 1. Thank you for doing that for me. In step 2, I would like you to start thinking about workability. And so I think everyone brings their own ideas as to what might be zoning items that you have stronger feelings about, or where you feel like these are really priorities based on my personal opinion or based on our master plan or whoever. But I know that some of these things sometimes are more on people's minds than others, and that really differs in any township I play this game with. And so I would ask which zoning item are your 3 highest priorities. It might be that they're red or yellow, but maybe they're not even that, and they're just important to you. And so I'm looking for volunteers to share. As you're explaining kind of how you flip through the cards and what colors and standards you landed on, can 1 or 2 folks of you share, like, what were some of the priorities and why you landed on the card that you landed on?
For me, priority was location control. So I think that making sure it goes in a place that is suitable was really important. Another priority was additional financial benefits, because I think that we should make sure the township wins if we're going to get into something like this. And the third, which may be less popular for some, but was sound, because I think it's one of the biggest, like, community concerns with any of these energy projects. It's the thing we hear most about.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing.
So I'll go a bit further. I think we should have been able to choose 5.
Okay. Well, I make the rules.
Yes. So height, sound, and setbacks were pretty darn important for me, but
Height, sound, and setbacks.
Amber also touched on a few that you could add in there that were pretty important.
And so for setback and sound, they're getting at, I'm just asking for clarification, it's like removing it from neighbors, like physically just having it out of mind, and the sound element to kind of like quiet and rural character.
Tolerable.
Tolerable.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tolerable to almost unnoticeable, I guess, or not annoying.
If I added a 4th, it would have been decommissioning.
So very different
Yeah.
perspectives on this.
That's why we're a team.
That's why, yeah, perfect. That's why there's more than one of you. And so the height element kind of gets at the visual impact also, just like
Correct.
as
the
not
setback.
unnoticeable as possible.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay. Is there a third volunteer?
My first one was decommissioning. That was a huge one for me, even working on our ordinance for the battery. Just because I don't see a way that all of this product that we're putting out there, whether it's wind or solar or battery, how we're going to deal with this. I mean, how are we going to repurpose? I sit here and I think about these wind turbines, and I'm originally from the Midwest, and when you go through Iowa and Nebraska, I mean, it just lights up the whole sky and it looks like a runway. I sit there and think, how can we do something with those to repurpose those instead of just bury them in the ground? Heck, maybe we can make homes out of them or something, who knows, you know? But, so decommissioning was big for me, and approval, because as much as I don't really like any of this, I still like to work with people. And then the other one was setbacks for me. So mine looks really different up here from some of these guys. So like you said, it's interesting to do this because we all still in the long, short of things, we all still work together. So.
And I also might want to add, like, I think there are some things that you can achieve through different zoning levers. So is it like, if rural character is something that's important to people, one might address that through screening versus height, or kind of setbacks, screening, height get a similar goal, I think. And so there are different ways of getting at that. Yeah. Would you like to share too?
Sure. Mine was additional financial benefit for what the township and for the citizen right there. The decommissioning plan, I'm 100% upon up front and look at every 3-5 years, because I know how this works because I do real estate and go back from there. Height was the next one for me. And then I guess the next one would be sound.
Okay. Thank you all so very much for sharing. I'm hearing all sorts of things. I don't know that there is a single thing that was not mentioned, maybe actually screening. And the other thing, which again can be achieved through different means, as well as kind of a timeline. And the timeline piece I have not explained really well because I was rushing through the prior slides. But it is, the idea of that was to, if the MPSC pathway takes so long and the CREO process is so quick, can you maybe through some form of resolution, or can you show to the developer a will to get this done with efficiently and not drag your feet? And that signal might get you some wiggle room to actually negotiate for the things that are, like if you're showing you're a good faith partner, that can get you potentially other priorities. So that's what that card set meant. Okay, great. That was very interesting. And it's like starting to balance. The next step in step 2 is, now that you identified the 3 things that are your top priorities, what are maybe 1 or 2 or 3 things that are lower on the priority list? And why might that be the case? Like if you had to give something up, what would you be willing to concede on?
Timeline, to your point, was probably the easiest to concede on. And for me, I even thought setbacks, which sounds crazy, I know, but if we're prioritizing sound, and that sort of is going to naturally impact setbacks, because if we're saying you have to maintain sound at a certain level, then we're gonna kind of insulate ourselves a little bit. So those are a couple for me.
Are there some other cards that stick out to you as you're thinking about the least? All of them are important, but if push comes to shove, which ones would you be more flexible on, perhaps?
Potentially ground cover too, although I love the pollinator habitat planning, so that's it's a fave for what it is, but.
Okay. Thank you for sharing those. Don't see any other volunteers, and that's perfectly all right. Okay, some of you might have on their desk a red card, or at least a yellow card. Even if you don't have a red, you probably have a yellow of some sort. If you have to give up one of those and change to a green or to a blue, which one would that be? That is my around the corner way of asking for your lesser priorities.
Ground cover.
Ground cover, okay.
Height.
Height, okay. If you give up height, is there something else you would want in return?
Have to look at it, see.
Timeline.
Timeline. Okay. So that's in line with what was mentioned prior, yep. Okay, so what I am hoping to get at here is kind of the process of if something is like a lower hanging fruit or not on top of your list, if you're willing to give up on something, that might increase your wiggle room is such a funny word, but your leverage in requiring like other things that you prioritize more. And so that is what I was trying to kind of get at here. My third, and this is the final step of this activity, and then thank you so much for doing this. Let's say you have proactively written a solar ordinance, you tried your very best to land on something that might be workable for the majority of developers, but now Sun Energy Inc., imaginary company, comes around the corner and approaches your community with a solar energy project somewhere in your township. They've already signed leases, they've already secured the land, and now it's up for local land use approval. It happens to be the case that the parcels they identified are not within the overlay or within the zoning district that you identified as appropriate for solar. If they lose these parcels, they would go to the Michigan Public Service Commission. What might your response be, or some of the considerations?
Well, I think we would want to work with them a little bit more and ask more questions. I don't think their first avenue would be go to the MPSC. I think they would dread that because of the requirements. So I wouldn't, that wouldn't be a threat to me making my decision.
Yeah, I think I would want to have certainly more conversation, and I would probably dig more deeply in terms of financial benefits and some other things that, where we can lobby to improve things. Also, potentially, depending on the location, is there, like, to the point made earlier, is there screening, is there things like that we could amplify? Are there other solutions that, for whatever reason, why that location we didn't originally deem suitable? Explore those options.
Thank you so much. Any other comments on that? Gut instinct? I would just summarize. I think so, calling the bluff or knowing that there is some leverage power that you can utilize, and then identifying what might those things be that we then highlight. And it's really, zoning really isn't a negotiation, but this is what this law is somewhat pushing towards. Okay, you successfully completed the activity. Congrats. Thank you. You're welcome to keep those card sets if helpful. If not, I take anything back to Ann Arbor that you don't want to keep. There is a final step on your instruction sheets, which we're going to skip today, but the idea really of it is to, unless you already have energy in your master plan, and I'm not familiar, I did not do my homework that well to check out your master plan ahead of time, but many communities do not have energy-specific goals in their master plan. But as you're thinking through zoning ordinance amendments and kind of thinking of what are the priorities here and how does that transcribe to a zoning ordinance, tying those concerns or tying these decisions to your master plan really bolsters a case for, and it makes it very transparent, like why a particular zoning standard is set that way. And so on this slide, where I'm just throwing out a couple of ideas as to what might be next, there is no decision from the MPSC yet on how they decide on the impact of farmland or on local land use and those kinds of things. So keeping an eye on, as the commission is receiving more applications, we are very much paying close attention to kind of get a sense for how might they be deciding on these projects and what might townships learn from that experience from other townships going through the process. In the meantime, really identifying your top community concerns and the different ways zoning can get at that, and really tying it very closely to your existing goals. And so there is on the instruction sheet at the very end, there's a table where you can connect certain master plan goals and how that might translate to zoning. And really keeping good track of that and including that in your findings to really show we did our homework here. Because on the one hand, if a developer approaches you and a project is being decided on at the local level, you really are prepared to enter these conversations and have like receipts to show. And if it were to go to the Michigan Public Service Commission at the end of the day, similarly, you have a track record and can really make the case to the commission about the priorities of your township and how that connects to maybe some of the conditions that the commission evaluates. I always advocate for talking to other townships, especially those that either are next door to you and how they might think about different pathways, as well as communities in Michigan that are either going through the state process or have renewable energy development in their communities to ask about their experience and what might be possible to be learning from them. Your attorney on retainer is the #1 advice that I can recommend to anyone, as well as your planner, to really have, because a lot of communities are currently updating their zoning ordinances on energy, so there's a high demand on attorneys and planners. And the last pitch I want to make is to actually reach out if you have questions about the state permitting process. The staff at the Public Service Commission that are handling and reviewing these applications have been responsive to townships requesting presentations in their townships or answering questions and jumping on a Zoom call and asking just questions, even if you don't already have a proposal in your township. That is very possible, and they're very happy to answer questions about the state process. I have a couple of resources with me today. I brought a whole box full of paperwork. So we have on our website a bunch of resources on PA 233. We have FAQs. We have this workable data that will soon include battery energy storage, but also the newest solar projects. We have a checklist for CREO and for MPSC processes. So if you find yourself in either of these, what are some of the key things to consider? And we have recorded webinars. If you want to like rewatch all of this again, you can do so. I also brought with me, we have different guidebooks, both on solar, which the first half of it is an explainer, most of what I covered today. And the second half is a sample zoning ordinance with a fill-in-the-blanks approach. It tells you each how would that setback compare to PA 233 and what might be workable and what might not be. We are currently updating, MSU Extension has a guidebook on wind. We're currently updating that together, and by the end of the year, we're hoping to have that 2020 document updated to 2026 reality, inclusive of PA 233 and including a sample zoning ordinance for that as well. The other thing I want to point out, Michigan Townships Association has fantastic resources on PA 233. The MPSC has a couple of FAQs and flowcharts that are really informational. And if there's any ongoing questions or any additional questions, I'd be more than happy to talk more about any of these things. But with that, I talked enough. And I really appreciate your time and the opportunity to chat about everything renewable today. And don't hesitate to reach out to me in the future if there's additional questions. Something that I'm able to do through Eagle funding is provide comments on draft ordinances and kind of compare how those sections might compare to PA 233 or workable data, connect you to other townships with renewables experience or folks at MSU Extension, and do training. We're hoping to organize a bus tour sometime this year of solar and battery facilities. And I know that I've been working with Kalamazoo County Sustainability Officers, Taylor Van Winkle, to put a bus tour together. So through those channels, you would be able to hear from about those opportunities as well. With that, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Informative.
Really good information.
Awesome.
And I loved the activity, so thanks.
Great, thank you.
She said we can keep it. I'm keeping it. I'm keeping it. It's gonna come back. I know it is. We're gonna find ourselves using it. I have a feeling. So here we go. All right. Moving on to old business. We have none.
If I may, Madeline, did you want to pass out the resources now or just leave them here so you can hit the road, or did you want to wait till the end? Okay, gotcha. Sorry, thank you. No old business. Oh, yeah, no old business.
No old business. And just for clarity, the rezoning request on G,
was withdrawn for now. I believe he has intent to come back in the future, but yeah, as of right now, it's not on the table.
I just think it's good for public awareness. Okay. Any other business? We have the housing study feedback discussion, and I think where we probably first want to start there is kind of the review of the grant. And
I will, I'll chime in first, if that's okay. Attorney Thal. So in March, I asked for an extension through July 31st for this grant. Therefore, the money, it would be our last $20,000 payment to cover this 50,000 housing project. And if we don't get done by July 31st, at this point, it had to be out the general fund budget. However, I did ask them if another extension is possible. He said we can ask for one more, but at this point, we need to figure out what our deadline would be. So after we talk through this, we can figure that out. I did ask what the master plan or what the grant standards are, and you can talk on this further as well. But he said the zoning ordinance and the master plan need to be updated. I said, well, if we can't do both, is that okay? He said we'll only get half the money, and the other half would be recaptured.
Well, we don't have time to update the master plan. That's already been kind of covered, I think.
So, and I think that's kind of where the second extension would come in, is if we start the master plan process to make the housing study or an amended version of the housing study part of the master plan. I think that would show them that we're working in good faith to meet the guidelines for the grant, and they would be more willing to grant that extension so we can give them more of a timeline for our master plan adoption. So that's kind of what Attorney Rob Dahl wanted me to talk about with you guys today, is that tonight the board should pass a motion to distribute a notice of intent to plan. And the reasoning behind that is that kicks off the master planning process. A notice would be sent out to all taxing entities that the township is working on its master plan, and it would probably specify that the intent of that is to add the housing study as an addendum after, reviewing and including any revisions you guys might have to it, to the master plan.
I have a question on that. So typically, they were discussing reviewing the master plan, but it'd be about, $50K to bring it, or $25K to bring a planner in, so we couldn't afford that. We wouldn't have to do
we don't have to do an entire master plan update.
Okay.
No, we can just, what we talked about is adding the housing study as like an addendum to the master plan. Just doing an amendment to the master plan to add an addendum that is this housing study after review and any amendment that you guys might come up with.
Okay. Trying really hard to choose my words carefully here. I guess my concern, or my question rather, I'll say it as a question. So there's a lot of action items in here. And I think that we would be unwise to adopt all of these action items. It's not possible, I don't think, for us to achieve all of these things. And I think there's a lot, for example, let's just as an example, develop and adopt a library of pre-approved building plans to reduce regulatory costs and cost barriers for small scale and first-time builders, eligible housing types, et cetera. Okay, sounds really good on paper, but who's responsible for that? What time and resources are we spending on that? There becomes additional cost, and my concern in putting something like this hypothetically into the master plan is, we're reminded often that we're sort of bound by our master plan, right? Like it's something we're supposed to. So I guess those are some of my concerns as I sort through all of this, and I'll pipe down and allow some other folks to chime in and ask questions or share thoughts.
I guess I have a question, Attorney Thal. So if, as Chair Lawrence is saying, she's not comfortable putting in the entirety of the housing study, they just would like to see our master plan updated to reflect some of the housing study. So I don't know what that would look like if the commission's not comfortable with the whole entirety of it.
That's kind of what our understanding is, which is why I mentioned, reviewing it and kind of revising what you guys think you might be comfortable incorporating into your master plan through an addendum. So like the specific action item you just mentioned, maybe you guys as a commission decide you don't like that, there's too many instrumentalities of figuring out how to implement it. So you say, well, we're going to strike that one. We're not going to include that in what we finally, so what'll happen, you guys would review the plan, make any revisions you want, and then you would have the board send out or send it to the board to send it out to distribution to these same taxing entities. That then triggers a 63-day waiting process where they get to review the housing plan or the amendment to the master plan, whatever, and provide comments and feedback. Okay, so during that 63 days, we're kind of just in a holding waiting period. After that, you guys receive the comments, they're purely advisory, then you guys hold a public hearing on them. After public hearing, you guys could still amend it further. If based on what you're hearing from the public, you think something needs to be struck, you maybe think something that got struck should be added back in. That may be a possibility at that point. And then you would send it up to the board for, well, that'd be a good question because the board has to reserve the right to finally approve the master plan. Is that the case here? Okay. So then, yeah, you would send it to the board for final adoption.
So my next question is, tonight we were asked to give feedback so that we can move this from a draft to a finalized version. But I'm not sure that we're prepared to, so if we move this to a finalized version, then is the expectation that that finalized version in its entirety goes to the master plan? Because that would be essentially planning prior to our notice of planning, right? Because we have to tell people, hey, we're thinking about adjustment.
So who wanted you to adopt as a final tonight?
Yeah, so the Uptown Institute started this back 3 years ago when the grant was first pulled. And so this is the draft. She wants feedback to make the final copy. This is not ready for public viewing yet. She wanted them to choose what strategies and strike what they want to strike so that she could put it in final form.
And do you think she'd be able to have that final form back for the next planning commission meeting?
I would believe so.
So like if we did the motion to intend to plan, you could get the final draft and then we'd have that to review at the next meeting.
Tight turnaround, but possible.
But she wants our feedback now of what we want to strike or keep or whatever in order to make the final draft. And that's where I feel like we're tying our hands because we're then saying something is a final draft and then we're now obligated to put this into our master plan or build this in when, quite frankly, all of these balls started rolling long before most of this commission was sitting in these seats.
I think before any of us were you here, Jimmy?
Yeah, I was here.
So he'd be the only one. So I kind of feel like we're being held hostage. That's what I feel, and I don't feel comfortable doing that at all.
Okay. So I guess an alternative, if we aren't comfortable, is to talk to the commissioner and see that we do have the housing study. We just will not be able to make that last ZO master plan update and talk about that $20K payment off the general fund. Don't know if that's a possibility, but if we don't want to use this to make changes to our ZO master plan, we need to pay that last grant payment, if that's an option. Or else, I guess the other consideration is, could they take the whole grant back, the whole $50K?
So that's why I'm saying I feel like we're being held hostage to something that we didn't approve. And I feel like they're asking us to do a lot more than what any of us are comfortable or want to do, myself anyway.
My concern is the timeline pressure of coming back with a final draft on this, knowing what is weighted on that now. I think that this is if we talked about at the beginning of the year wanting to get into the master plan. So I don't think any of us are opposed to getting into it and talking through it, but I don't like feeling rushed or feeling like we have to make a decision right now on it in order to then be committed to something. Like, I think this is going to require more dialogue and conversation before we say, okay, great, let's build it in. Joseph, what do you got?
Well, I think it's safe to say that we all agree that there's action items here that we're not prepared to agree to. There's just radical stuff that none of us are comfortable with. So if we have to pick and choose, you know, if that's what we have to do is boil this down to something that we are willing to put into the master plan, we're not prepared to do that right now. So I'm not sure how to proceed to get us out of the time crunch, but we need to proceed incrementally.
Do we have ideas? So at the last meeting, we agreed we would all come prepared to talk about what we didn't like in here. Is anybody prepared to do that tonight? And just start axing things?
I mean, I can give you things to axe, no problem.
We can go through that page number and let us know what you do not like. That would make progress to the tabling again.
I think we have to, you know, I don't want to say, like, this is not all for my decision, though. Somebody else might have an opinion, right?
A discussion. We have time.
I have I have a mixed opinion on, so page 59, we're looking at goal 1, right? Strategy number 1. I have mixed opinion about amending the zoning ordinance to allow accessory dwellings township-wide as a permitted use. I think that that's subject to administrative approval. I think that that's probably a little bit too broad, so I'm not in favor of that.
Right. I mean, yeah, that's a perfect example of what I think goes farther than I'm comfortable with as far as the zoning ordinance change. You know, I think we want to retain more control, and I don't see that as, I mean, I understand why they put that in here, but I don't see that as an important element of making housing more affordable or more accessible. I think that's a minor thing that, and an element of administrative or planning commission control that I'm not willing to give up.
So that would be one. The second one talks about conduct a comprehensive review of dimensional and development standards in designated growth areas, including parking requirements, setbacks, minimum sizes, et cetera. We already have the smallest lot sizes allowable in the state with the R1C text amendment that went through. So I'm not really sure that review, and that's pretty polarizing in the community. I'm not sure that going through.
But at least the language of this, you know, by asking us to conduct a comprehensive review, we can say we did that. You know,
Okay,
that's
fair.
vague, you know, and that's what I was hoping to do was boil these down. I mean, I hate to say it out loud, but put it in language that gives us some discretion and some wiggle room and make it appear that we are certainly considering the scope and the intent of these strategies and stuff, but encoding them, you know, actually changing the ordinance to make, you know, to give these away by right, I think goes beyond what we're comfortable with, and I don't.
Okay.
So I'm looking for a middle ground.
Maybe number 2 stays. Number 3, amend the zoning ordinance to permit multiple family residential and mixed-use development within all commercial zoning districts where compatible with surrounding land use. Is a little broad, but potentially, like, I like the idea of mixed-use development in commercial zoning districts. I think that might be something. And I like that it gives us the where compatible with surrounding land use.
Yeah, I mean, there is potential in something like that. That one is, but again, I think it needs to be fine-tuned a little bit before you try to put that in an ordinance. It's broad the way it is.
Number 4, I would strike entirely. Expand administrative review authority for site plan approval for qualifying small-scale residential and mixed-use developments in order to streamline approval timelines. It's too broad. I agree.
Number 6, duplexes by right.
I agree, number 6 is too much.
So you're striking 4 and 6?
My opinion, that's up for debate from others.
You know, like number 6, by special use, that would be different, but to do it
Correct.
right, it
Correct.
just gives us no discretion at all. No protection for particular
Totally agree.
neighborhoods or particular situations. There should be a review.
Totally agree. I don't think it should be by right. I think it could be, permitted as special land use, but I think it probably already,
I think it already
is, yeah.
Back to number 5, are you asking that one or recommending Chair Lawrence to develop a library?
I like it in theory. My concern is whose responsibility is it to maintain and what goes into building that library, I guess is my only question or concern there.
I wonder, we don't have a building department in-house, so it'd be CABA. So how can we create that library of building plans when CABA has their own regulations?
But then where does liability come in?
Right. Like if we were to take those things from CABA and just put them available for citizens use.
Oh, yeah, we
here,
can't do
but
that.
then- Yeah.
Yeah, we can't do
Right. It's not, yeah, so maybe 5 needs to go. Can we link some things on our website for people, so that it takes them to the places they need to go to find it?
There's different verbs used here, strengthen, establish, and then encourage, support, and incentivize. Those are vague enough that, you can make progress towards them, but then, provide or, expand the zoning allowances, those are pretty, those are.
Or authorize, number 8, authorize the use of housing-related financial incentives, including but not limited to neighborhood enterprise zones, payment in lieu of taxes, and housing tax increment financing where consistent with township fiscal policies and housing goals. My concern there is I don't have enough of the financial knowledge to know the impact of that decision. And I feel unqualified as a planning commissioner to say, yeah, that sounds good.
A lot of these could certainly go, strengthen code enforcement procedures. Okay, yeah, put that in the master plan, makes sense.
So how far do you go before you just throw this thing away?
Well,
I don't mean, I'm just being direct.
I wonder if
That's a valid question. I mean, the value of this is questionable.
So going forward, the master plans are going to be required to have a housing portion. I wonder if we could just count chapters 1 through 5 without the being bound by the action items.
By the goals and objectives?
Yeah, that might be something to consider.
Okay.
Yeah, the goals of the objectives are.
Were you all fine?
That's the part that we have the biggest problem with, right?
Like, were you guys fine with the other items, like the survey results? I know you guys weren't happy with the number of people who participated, but,
I'd like a disclaimer in there of the number of people.
does it say, yeah? 2% is pretty good, guys.
2% of our population.
That's all listen, that's all we got.
I thought it was 179.
Something like that, yeah.
Well, yeah, it says 135 responses.
Okay, it's in there.
And
I kind of feel like this is, I don't want to say this is outdated, but I feel like it's been so long ago that we're moving and changing so fast with things that are happening nationwide.
Right.
And I'll just leave it at that.
And we don't have control what is going on in the building process with the materials and try and make things affordable, and with lenders and guidelines and stuff like that right now, it's being very difficult.
I do think there's a spot where kind of our PUD ordinance sort of fits, like objective 1.3, expand zoning allowances for alternative and missing middle housing types, including condominiums, cottage courts, townhomes. Like our PUD ordinance did that. So there's one, so it probably would get boiled down to a very, very small number of these, which we could do, but I think that we need to address that that's the reality of where we would feel comfortable.
Gotcha. All right.
So I don't know where you want to go from there, Casey.
I don't know, I think if we just boil it down, there's goal 1, objective 1.1. I don't know if in the future we can try and just make one, strategy sentence, I don't know. Review zoning ordinance to allow for the diversity of rental homeownership. Like, I know that that's objective 1.1, but if we just don't want to be bound by saying authorize, require, amend, it sounds like you guys are fine with like review or consider.
Correct.
So I'm not quite sure how to go from there. I could check with Emily, but then we have that timeline. So I'm not quite sure what I could extend the grant to. I can try and push it to like next March. If I say like March, or even a year from now.
We have to, so just for clarification, because we've talked about this when we talked about our master plan previously. So next year, we have to review it, correct?
Correct.
So in theory, if we start reviewing, it is, right? We're already halfway through this year. So my thought is if we start the work now, like it's not all for naught because it has to happen next year anyway. So we start putting in time for this and dedicating time to it, but that's what it's going to take. So yeah, in terms of extending that, if we truly want to incorporate information from this into our master plan, I think, I don't know, I'm looking around the board here, but like we want to actually plan. We want to spend the time on it.
Oh, go ahead. Your commissioner, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that we need to start looking at the goal, like maybe one goal at a meeting and then another goal and put it on our agenda so we can start looking at it and get this accomplished and get it motivated so that we are moving forward.
Is there a way to set time aside for a workshop so we can devote time to it, not at the end of a meeting?
Well, I think we just need to make it the single agenda. Like if we have a meeting where we don't have something coming from the community that has to be addressed, then this becomes our single item on the agenda so that we can spend the full meeting on it.
I have questions for Attorney Thaw, speaking about master plan review. So it's time for our review next year, and that could be just a simple, we look at it, we like it, or does that require notice to intent again? Or notice of intent to plan?
I believe that typically it involves going through the entire process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, and we just heard tonight, I mean, we don't have energy in our master plan, and that was one of the things, again, we discussed that at the beginning of the year, was part of the reason we wanted to address the master plan this year, is we need to consider that.
But then I would keep in mind as well how big we want to go. I know we're talking about residents and surveys and charrettes and adding chapters that has a cost associated to it. And so of course, I don't know the budget and what we have next year as far as master plan. We have a review for it, but I don't know if they intended the entire review. So I think that's also something important to.
Well, I think it's detrimental to, just as much as I think it would be detrimental to just accept this because we're afraid of loss of $20,000, I think we risk far more of the community if we don't do our due diligence. That's my opinion.
I agree. I don't know, this might should have it in the meeting, we can't. Can we have a workshop before one of our meetings? And do like an hour before or something? So then we can go into our meeting? It's an idea.
I guess I just need to know what to ask in the grant for.
Tell me we changed our mind.
Leave it open-ended.
I just feel like we're being pushed into something that our residents aren't going to want, and we don't even want it sitting here. So what does that say?
So I guess.
They see how long they would be willing to extend.
Okay.
Take whatever the max is.
We need 20 years.
And you know, what if they say 20 years?
But what if they were to give us to the end of next year, right? Because we're already going into our planning process next year. So December 31st,
Okay.
2027, and explain that that's when our planning process is.
Okay.
And
So then, this probably isn't important, but the Upjohn Institute sent that bill for the finalized payment like a month ago. And so I told her, we'll hopefully get the last grant, payment, late summer. And so if I tell her we have to wait until next year, I wonder how she'll feel about that. But that's the reality. Maybe she'll request that $20,000 out of the general fund.
Yeah, and then you guys would just get to keep the grant money, then maybe, yeah.
Okay.
And one other thing I would just say, because it does talk about in the grant exhibit, it talks about both having to do the master plan and zoning amendments. We do think that the amendment that you mentioned earlier, the PUD amendment satisfies the ordinance amendment portion of that. So it's really just the master plan element that we need to satisfy for them for that second part of the grant.
okay, that's good news.
I think, there's 4 goals here.
Yeah.
If we set a kind of a schedule for ourselves to try to tackle, in some reasonable period of time, each of these goals, go through them as a group and decide what we want to incorporate into the master plan and what we don't, maybe we can get through this in a reasonable, at least know what we want to do with this. We started going through goal 1 here, and I thought, if we do set aside some time in our meetings, I think we could work our way through these, because that's where our problem I think, is in the goals and objectives. The rest of it, we're not too
The rest of it is really just data. Like, it's pretty objective data, albeit from 2%.
So this could be an action item discussion, but next meeting, the 28th, we don't have anything on the agenda for public hearing. We're coming from residents, or we could have it then, or we could do what Commissioner Nowak said and have it prior to the meeting. So 4 to 6 workshop followed by our regularly scheduled meeting.
I think that would be a good start to get going. We gotta get rolling with it.
Workshop?
Yeah, workshop.
I agree.
Do we need attorneys there? Do you guys feel comfortable without an attorney, or do you want an attorney there?
Maybe not.
I think we'd be comfortable without, because we're just gonna be spitballing at that point.
Perfect.
And they're gonna probably review it when we get done anyway, so.
When we get a final list of where we want to go, we'll certainly have it reviewed and make sure we are doing what we need to for the grant.
All right. So we will tentatively have a workshop May 28th from 4 to 6 p.m.
The housing study.
They get something out of it, I would assume.
With the people who created it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
They get
50K.
money.
Of course.
The grant, in turn, just pays for this work. All right. Casey, when did you want to bring up the stable?
During future action items, I'm sure he'll probably speak on it before.
Okay.
Or during citizen comment.
All right, then we are moving along to citizen comment. Once again, you have 3 minutes, and you know the drill. Welcome to the podium if anyone would like to speak. All right, beautiful. Updates from other boards.
No ZBA meeting this past month, nor this month. We have 3 new members on the ZBA. I have not met them yet. I need their emails to let them know it's canceled. So if you're watching, no meeting this month.
All right, training updates?
None.
Informational and future action items.
So as I stated earlier, there's no public hearing or really applicant-based agenda item for the 28th. And so I wonder if this is the time to take up things like looking at sample ordinance for solar or battery, or not battery, solar or wind, or data centers, or listening to what we're considering vacant lot structures. What else was mentioned? Yes, Tim Shank was here earlier. He spoke about how firework tents are not allowed on vacant lots, and he would like that looked at. So I haven't received an application for an amendment from either.
Can I ask you a question on that?
Mm-hmm.
What has changed, if he's been doing that for years, what has changed that is now causing us to say no? Because I don't know of an ordinance that we've passed that would change that.
Correct. I do not know. So the previous zoning administrator was approving it. When I came in right at firework season last year, I do not know if it was me or the consultant working through that. And then I remember last year, the applications came in and we were like, okay, I know that they were approved for 10 years at this point. The administrator was approving them, one last year, but from now on, no more, because the ordinance spells it out. Honestly, it should have been probably denied last year, but because they were like, well, they were doing it. And so I did tell them, I thought I relayed to all of them, no more vacant lot structures or no more vacant lot firework tents. But they submitted an application for a few of them, and I said.
So we're not doing the tents because of the vacant lot structure rule?
No, so that's what misspoke. So temporary sales and services, it states that temporary sales and services must operate on a lot with a lawfully established business. And then it says temporary sales and services may not take place on vacant lots. So it says it like 3 times in the top of the ordinance.
And were we doing it potentially before because if the lot is contiguous with another lot that has a structure and it's owned by the same person? Because I don't know, I see you thinking through that.
I mean, that could have been the justification for the planner in the past. I don't know any of the specific locations, so I can't say for sure if that's the case, but
I honestly don't know either. I'm just like, what if it's
It could
contiguous?
have been that the past planner thought that rule was too strict and decided, we're just kind of gonna let them do these. We don't see the harm in it, kind of thing.
That's what they were telling me. They were saying things like, it's just temporary, it's for 14 days, like, what's the problem? But I'm like, the ordinance spells it out, and so we need to follow the ordinance. But, so he came, because I told him it's not allowed, so he came to the meeting, hoping you guys would take it under consideration. So I don't know if next meeting you guys want to look at that, next meeting.
I think we should.
I agree, I think we should.
Yeah, do we have to wait? I mean,
Well, here's the thing.
well, I mean,
You'd have to amend
we
the
would have
agenda
to-
right now.
So like, you could tell me.
we'd have to have a public.
Get the public hearing.
You gotta have the public hearing.
So you,
Can we at least schedule that?
yes, so,
Yeah, do it.
okay.
I would like to
I think
at
that
least
we're
get
gonna-
that on the books as soon as possible.
I think we're gonna need a motion for that.
All right, I'll make a motion that we schedule a public hearing to review the ordinance that prevents temporary sales on empty lots.
Support.
Motion made by Commissioner Weintraub, supported by Secretary Kreitzer, to hold the public hearing at our next meeting.
It'll be June 11th, because we need 15 days, unless we want to go crazy, get a special meeting first week of June for it.
We're gonna rule them out of
And we can work
opportunity
on
this
the
year.
time, we can work on the text.
Or we could move our June 11th meeting up a week. So that would, can anybody tell me what that, let me see.
That's the last week of school.
We just need 15 days to get that notice out.
It's literally the last day of school. June 4th would be the meeting.
It is the last day, because I got graduations to go to.
When does he usually set up the tents? What's the date?
June 20th.
Okay.
So
it would have to be June 4th.
Would be in time.
But then it would require 2 readings at the Township Board to approve.
Yeah, we're totally, there's no way for us to.
No, and he can't do it any other way.
It always requires 2 readings. There's no way to adopt an ordinance at a sitting. Okay.
I know it's probably not. I know.
Well, that's too bad.
If we can't swing it, I don't see a reason to have a special meeting for it.
That guy spends a lot of money in this town to make things nice.
Yep.
It's not that, for me, it's the fireworks and they belong in a vacant lot. I mean, who wants them close to a business or a building? It just makes sense.
And to check with,
Selling from them in ours. they do.
Yeah.
and Attorney Thought,
So,
Well, next to, the Mexican restaurant too, they're awful close to that building.
yeah.
Yeah.
and this would be a use variance that they went in front of the
Yeah.
ZBA.
It would be.
And-
I was thinking about maybe a variance, but yeah, I think it'd be a use variance.
We don't allow for use variances in the township.
Is it possible for the board to waive enforcement?
While we go over the ordinance? Because we'd be
I
diligent.
mean, technically, enforcement of ordinances is discretionary.
Yeah.
Okay, so technically, you guys could go on a, don't tell us what you're doing and we're not gonna come after you. The problem you have with that is
said
if
it.
people, the problem you will have is if people make complaints about it,
Right.
now you might actually have to enforce, and we still have the issue of it being illegal under the ordinance.
And it's not us enforcing,
Right.
so,
Right.
That
like,
would be
we
up
have
to the
no
township
enforcement
board,
power.
but-
Could they instruct our supervisor officer then at that? I guess, fine.
I mean, there's plenty of things to enforce in
You
this town.
could, unless I would say you're getting complaints. If
Okay.
you start getting complaints, that's where you do have to start actually enforcing,
Because then I guess,
would be my opinion.
in all honesty, for enforcement, he gives them a ticket, they have 14 days to comply.
Yeah, so he's good.
So then it'd be gone in 14 days, technically, technically. But-
Wow.
Could we make a
if-
recommendation to
Yeah.
the township board
Yeah.
that they waive enforcement for the 4th of July?
It is the 250 years, so.
I guess if we're promising the township board, we'll have a public hearing for vacant lot tents, and and everybody is agreeing to change it, then I guess maybe that's a better sell right there as well. Like, we're working on it.
So could we schedule it the June 11th? And then is that something, like, we either need to vote on? Is that something that you can take on our behalf
Treasurer Bloomfield would take that to the township board.
as our liaison?
Yeah, I don't know if member comments can have like votes, but you have a meeting, Monday and then the 1st, which would, so I don't know if the 1st you want to add to the agenda, or I could add it to the agenda, I'll be there, so.
The 1st, or you're going to be there tomorrow?
I'll be
or
there
Monday
the
night?
1st, we'll be there Monday. So the 1st I could be there, and I could present that there will be a public hearing June 11th for this, and we are requesting a complaint-based enforcement on temporary sales of fireworks.
I guess the one thing I don't like is the township board, like, affirmatively saying we're not gonna enforce our ordinance. I would just do it more informally, where the code officer is just told, hey, unless you get complaints about this, don't go out looking for it, kind of
Okay.
thing,
I like that.
rather than official board action.
Yep.
Makes sense. So then don't take it to the board.
No,
Okay.
I wouldn't take it to the board.
I guess my concern is just, yeah, my biggest concern is that we're being inconsistent with how we're applying that. And so I think that's why we need to try to rectify something, because that feels,
We are rectifying it.
right,
Yeah, we should change.
It's
the
been
ordinance for the
inconsistent anyways.
correct.
And now we're taking it in discussion with us and then going to present it to the board.
Okay.
What about latches? I mean, they've been doing it for how many years? That falls under latches, they should still be able to do it.
Is that grandfather? What does that mean?
No, because it's a
know
seasonal
what
kind of
that is.
thing.
What's latches?
Because it's a temporary kind of thing where it's seasonal, if they had been established in a location continually, they leave their tent up year-round, I think they'd have an argument at that point that, no, you can't just make us tear it down. But because it's seasonal, I don't think we can say, well, they do this every single year, so we're just gonna do it.
Does any state law trump where they can put a tent?
I'd have to research that.
State law trumps the firework thing anyways.
So we're all in agreement that we would allow temporary sales on vacant lots, and that's what you would like me to create, for the next agenda, you all can see.
For the public hearing.
Yes.
We have a motion on the table technically for a public hearing at our next scheduled meeting.
But would you like to see the prepared ordinance next meeting with the strikeouts? I can strike out.
Sure, yeah.
Yes.
Obviously, yeah, we
That's a good
need to-
idea.
Yes.
That would be a
To make
great
sure it's what you
starting
want.
point.
Yes, I don't think I've seen the ordinance yet, so.
Yeah,
All right, we need to vote on the motion that's on the table, which is to hold a public hearing for temporary sales on vacant lots. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay. So schedule that on the June 11th.
Correct.
And we'll see what we can do there.
Perfect. Let me go back to my future action items. So yes, I mentioned the Eastland Bowl site plan review, and during like you guys' I think January, you all mentioned wanting to be in the know of things coming down the pipeline. So Eastland Bowl is temporarily paused as the ordinance may not allow what they want to do, which is outdoor storage in their zoning district. So that's the only harm with me like saying things, but then I have to like take it back. But if that's, you guys don't mind me reading like that, okay, perfect. And then on June 1st, we'll have landscaping, mobile vendor, and PUD revisions going to the Township Board for approval, recommendation for approval. And then I guess the other resident request was to consider vacant lot structures as he owns land on Starward and has been told he cannot put a shed on there. I'm not quite sure if we want to bring that. May 28th, I work with the chair on that. Again, no meeting, no public hearing next meeting. So we pretty much have a free meeting to work on what we want to work on.
I really think we need to work on this situation because we have kicked this can down the road 3 meetings in a row now.
That's going to be the workshop from 4 to 6 p.m., May 28th.
May 28th.
Right. And then we have the meeting after that.
Correct. So we want to, do you just not want to workshop then, and we just want to have a 6 p.m. meeting with this?
Consensus of the group?
I think we need to be able to work on it without public comment, without any distractions.
And workshop, can we get more accomplished by working at it?
But we can't make anything official without doing it in the meeting. So my point is, like, then that carries on to the meeting agenda. Okay, well, we can work through the agenda. We can start to have some conversation perhaps about the vacant lots structure.
For sure.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Casey. At the end of the last meeting, you mentioned that you had a site plan for a best. Where?
Cannot share that.
What's that?
Where, like location, cannot share that yet. It's not public knowledge.
When will we get visibility to said site plan? Because my concern is, you mentioned it's like an 800-page document.
Yes.
So we need time with it is also my concern.
No, so the game plan isn't really worked out yet. There's a lot of, with site plans, a lot of back and forth between multiple agencies, us, them, us. So that's where we're at currently, just lots of review.
Okay.
It's not ready for the Planning Commission's viewing yet.
Okay, got it. What was are we gonna address the stable concern?
Oh, yes, thank you. So a resident stopped in, one second, I have my copy somewhere. As a resident stopped in and he was inquiring about our stable regulations. And you all have a handout under 4.39. And he interpreted it as you are allowed 2 saddle horses or ponies no matter how big your lot is. And I kind of agreed with that, but if the language needs to be cleaned up to explain better.
Yeah, I would disagree with that. For breeding, rearing, and housing of horses, mules, and similar domestic animals, the minimum lot size shall be 10 acres. So it's just saying, in order to do this, you have to have 10 acres. Except that up to 2 saddle horses or ponies may be housed and reared on lots 5 acres or more. And that's specific to say saddle horses or ponies, whereas the other part says mules and similar domestic animals. So that's where I think there's a differentiation too. Like, you can't have an emu or a donkey on 5 acres. You can have saddle horses or ponies.
And if you feel this is satisfactory, then perfect. But there are townships that do have it listed, like the chicken ordinance, where if you have 5 acres, you're allowed 2 or less. You have 6 acres, you're allowed 3 or less. But this is explanation enough. That's fine too.
I think it's clear enough.
Okay,
I think so too.
Gotcha. And that's all I have for future action items. Thank you guys.
Should we let him talk?
It's not public comment,
Not really
unfortunately.
public comment right now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, John.
Sorry. Okay. All right, planning commissioner comments. Greg?
Nothing tonight.
Joe?
I'm good.
I feel we got some work to do. I think we gotta work on this housing plan. We gotta get some things taken care of, and I'm looking forward to get some work done. Thank you.
Sandy?
I have a question, and I don't know who this goes to. It either goes to you or to you. Where are we at with Tim Carney? What's going on there?
Yeah, so I reached out to Tim Kearney April 13th after the board advised you all to take it under consideration. Didn't hear anything back, and I just heard back this morning. So I haven't reviewed the email yet, but.
Oh, okay.
Yep, so
Isn't that funny? I brought it up tonight, now you heard back.
yes, I actually just heard back this morning. I was like, oh, this is great.
Have we heard anything from DHHS on it?
I heard back from both of them this morning.
Okay,
It was
great.
the same email thread, they both replied.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Okay, well, that's good. We're moving forward with that. Okay, and then Amber has some news. You have an email account
I
now.
do, which is going to be part of my comments, but for anyone
That's it. Take it.
anyone that needs to reach the planning commission chair, it is accessible. I am accessible, and this email will be accessible for any future planning commission chairs as well. pcchair@comstockmi.gov. So that is now available.
PC chair, huh?
PC chair.
And then I'd like for Casey to announce hers at the same time for people listening or whatever. Could you do that as well,
Yes,
please?
you can reach me at zoning, ZONING, ASST, @comstockmi.gov.
Is it online also?
Yes, it's online under the planning department.
Thank you.
And I think that was that's all I got. So with that, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.